Hello everyone, I am the storyteller and I am here to help you today. I know you use this video to fall asleep, so before that, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Now get comfortable and relax. The scratching sound came from directly above my bed. At first I thought it was just the house settling or maybe a squirrel on the roof. But as I lay there in the darkness, my eyes wide open, I realized it was too rhythmic, too deliberate to be anything but human. I'd been hearing strange noises in my attic for weeks now, little thuds and creaks that I'd dismissed as the usual sounds an old house makes. But tonight was different. Tonight, the sounds were unmistakable. My heart raced as I slowly sat up in bed, careful not to make a sound. The scratching continued, steady and persistent. I reached for my phone on the nightstand, my fingers trembling as I dialed 911. But as soon as I pressed the call button, the scratching stopped abruptly. I held my breath, the phone pressed to my ear, waiting for the operator to pick up. The silence in the house was deafening. Then, just as I heard a voice on the other end of the line, a loud thud came from the attic, followed by quick, heavy footsteps. 911, what's your emergency? I whispered urgently into the phone. There's someone in my attic. Please hurry. I gave them my address and hung up, my entire body shaking. The footsteps above had stopped, but I could hear faint rustling sounds. Whoever was up there was still moving around. I slipped out of bed, my bare feet silent on the cold hardwood floor. I needed to get out of the house, but the stairs to the first floor were directly beneath the attic access. If I tried to leave, I'd be right in the intruder's path. Instead, I crept to my closet and grabbed the baseball bat I kept there for protection. My palms were sweaty as I gripped it tightly, my eyes fixed on the ceiling. The minutes ticked by agonizingly slowly. Where were the police? I strained my ears, hoping to hear sirens, but all I could hear was my own ragged breathing and the occasional creak from above. Then, a new sound made my blood run cold. It was coming from the hallway outside my bedroom, the soft scraping of the attic access panel being moved. My throat tightened as I realized the intruder was coming down. I pressed myself against the wall next to my bedroom door, the bat raised and ready. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure it would give me away. The hallway floorboards creaked under the weight of slow, careful footsteps. They paused just outside my door. I held my breath, every muscle in my body tense. The doorknob turned slowly, and the door began to open. In the dim light from my window, I saw a shadow fall across the floor. As the figure stepped into the room, I swung the bat with all my might. There was a sickening thud and a cry of pain. The intruder stumbled backward, and I took the opportunity to run. I bolted past them, down the stairs and out the front door into the cool night air. I ran to my neighbor's house, pounding on their door until the porch light flicked on. As they opened the door, I finally heard the blessed sound of police sirens in the distance. The next hour was a blur of police statements and questions. They searched my house thoroughly, but found no sign of the intruder. They assured me that they would increase patrols in the area and suggested I stay with a friend for a few days, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they had missed something. The way the intruder had moved, how they seemed to know the layout of my house. It felt too familiar, too practiced. Against my better judgment, I decided to stay. I couldn't explain it, but I needed to know what was happening in my own home. The next day, I called a locksmith and had every lock in the house changed. I installed a security system with cameras covering every entrance, but even with these precautions, I couldn't relax. Every little sound made me jump, and I found myself constantly checking the attic access panel. A week passed without incident, but my unease grew. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, even when I was alone in the house. I started noticing little things out of place. A book moved on the shelf, a cup in the sink I didn't remember using. I knew I was probably being paranoid, but I couldn't help myself. I started spending hours examining every inch of my house, looking for any sign of how the intruder had gotten in. It was during one of these searches that I found it. I was in the spare bedroom, running my hands along the baseboards, when I felt a slight give in the wall. My heart raced as I pressed harder, and suddenly a small section of the wall swung inward. Behind it was a narrow passage, dark and musty. I shone my flashlight inside, revealing a crude ladder leading up to the attic. My hands shook as I realized the truth. There had been a hidden entrance to my attic this whole time. I should have called the police right then, but curiosity and a need for answers overrode my common sense. I took a deep breath and started climbing. The attic was bigger than I had imagined, stretching the entire length of the house. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing piles of boxes and old furniture. But as I moved deeper into the space, I saw something that made my stomach churn. In the far corner, hidden behind a stack of old trunks, was a makeshift living area. There was a sleeping bag on the floor, surrounded by empty food wrappers and water bottles. A small battery-powered lamp sat on an overturned crate, next to a pile of books. But what really caught my eye was the wall behind this little camp. It was covered in photographs, dozens of them. As I stepped closer, my breath caught in my throat. They were all of me. There I was, walking to my car, working in the garden, sitting in my living room. Some were clearly taken from outside the house, but others could only have been taken from inside. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Someone had been living in my attic, watching me for months. I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. I had to get out, had to call the police. But as I turned to leave, my flashlight beam fell on something that made me freeze. It was a small door, built into the knee wall of the attic. It was slightly ajar, and beyond it, I could see a faint light. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I found myself moving towards the door instead. I had to know. I had to see. I pushed the door open slowly, wincing at the creak of its hinges. The space beyond was small, no bigger than a closet, but what it contained made my blood run cold. The walls were covered in writing, scrawled messages and rambling paragraphs that made no sense. In the center of the room was a small table, and on it sat a laptop, its screen glowing softly. I stepped closer, my eyes drawn to the open document on the screen. As I read the words there, I felt the world tilt around me. Day 156. She almost caught me today. I was careless, made too much noise. But it's okay. She's not ready yet. Soon, though. Soon she'll understand why I'm here. Why I've been watching her. She's the one. The only one who can help me. Help us. She just doesn't know it yet. The words blurred as tears filled my eyes. This person, this stranger, had been living in my house, watching my every move, for over 5 months, and they thought I was some kind of chosen one, to help them with what? I heard a noise behind me and spun around, my heart in my throat. There, blocking the entrance to the small room, stood a figure. In the dim light, I could make out wild, unkempt hair and eyes that gleamed with an unsettling intensity. "You weren't supposed to find this yet," the stranger said, their voice hoarse. "But maybe it's time. Maybe you're finally ready to learn the truth." I backed away, my back pressing against the table. "Who are you? What do you want from me?" The stranger stepped forward, and I caught a whiff of unwashed body and stale food. "I'm here to save you, to save all of us. You're the key, don't you see? Your research, your work. It's the answer we've been looking for." My mind raced. My research? I was a data analyst for a small tech company. How could that be the answer to anything? "You're confused. You're scared. I understand," the stranger continued, taking another step closer. "But soon, you'll see. Soon, you'll understand why I had to do this. Why I had to watch you, learn everything about you." I glanced around desperately, looking for a way out, but the stranger blocked the only exit. I was trapped. "Please," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't understand. Just tell me what you want." The stranger's face softened, an unsettling smile spreading across their features. "What I want you to fulfill your destiny. I want you to use your skills to decode the message that will save us all." As they spoke, I noticed a small remote control on the table next to the laptop. Without thinking, I grabbed it and pointed it at the stranger. "Stay back!" I yelled, hoping to startle them. To my surprise, the stranger's eyes widened in fear. "No!" they screamed. "Don't press that! You'll ruin everything!" In my confusion, my finger slipped, pressing one of the buttons. Suddenly, a high-pitched wail filled the air. It was my new security system's alarm. The stranger howled in frustration and lunged at me, but I ducked under their arm and ran. I scrambled through the attic, down the hidden passage, and out into the hallway. I could hear the stranger crashing behind me, but I didn't look back. I ran out of the house and into the street, the alarm still blaring behind me. As police sirens approached in the distance, I stood there, shaking and gasping for breath. My quiet life had been shattered, my sense of safety destroyed, and I was left with a chilling realization. Sometimes, the monsters aren't hiding under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes they're right above us, watching and waiting. The headlights flickered once, twice, and then died completely, plunging us into darkness. The engine sputtered its last gasp, and our car rolled to a stop on the narrow, winding road. I turned the key in the ignition, but all I got was a sad clicking sound. We were stranded. "This can't be happening," Sarah muttered beside me, her voice tight with frustration. I could barely make out her silhouette in the dim moonlight filtering through the trees. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd see. No signal. We were miles from the nearest town, surrounded by dense forest. The GPS had gone haywire about an hour ago, leading us down this lonely stretch of road that wasn't even on our map. "What do we do now, Jack?" Sarah asked, a hint of panic creeping into her voice. I squinted through the windshield, trying to pierce the darkness. That's when I saw it. A faint glow in the distance, off to our right. "Look," I said, pointing. "There's a light. Must be a house or something. Maybe they have a phone we can use." Sarah hesitated. "I don't know. Walking up to a stranger's house in the middle of nowhere. It seems risky." I understood her concern, but we didn't have many options. It's either that, or spend the night in the car and hope someone drives by tomorrow, which, judging by how deserted this road is, might not happen. She sighed, relenting. "Okay, but let's be careful." We grabbed our flashlights from the glove compartment and stepped out of the car. The night air was cool and damp, heavy with the scent of pine and wet earth. Our footsteps crunched on the gravel as we made our way towards the light. As we got closer, I could make out the shape of a large farmhouse. It was old, with peeling paint and a sagging porch, but warm light spilled from the windows, promising shelter and help. We approached the front door, and I raised my hand to knock. Before I could, the door swung open, revealing a tall, thin man with graying hair and deep-set eyes. "Well, hello there," he said, his voice gravelly, but not unkind. "What brings you folks out here so late?" I explained our situation, and the man's face broke into a sympathetic smile. "Car trouble, eh? That's a tough break. Name's Earl. Why don't you two come on in and we'll see about getting you some help?" Sarah squeezed my hand, a silent reminder to be cautious. But Earl's friendly demeanor and the warmth emanating from the house were too inviting to resist. We stepped inside, and I was immediately struck by how cluttered the place was. Every surface was covered with knickknacks, old newspapers, and what looked like mechanical parts. The air was thick with the smell of tobacco and something else I couldn't quite place. "Martha," Earl called out. We've got company." A short, plump woman with frizzy gray hair appeared from what I assumed was the kitchen. She wiped her hands on her apron and gave us a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh my, visitors at this hour. How exciting," she exclaimed, her voice high and reedy. "You poor dears must be exhausted. Why don't you have a seat in the living room while I fix you some tea?" Before we could protest, Martha ushered us into a cramped room dominated by a large, threadbare sofa. The walls were covered in old photographs, their subjects staring at us with blank eyes. Earl settled into a worn armchair across from us. "So, where are you folks headed?" I told him about our trip to visit Sarah's parents, careful not to give too many details. As I spoke, I noticed Earl's eyes darting between us, as if sizing us up. Martha bustled in with a tray of tea and cookies. As she set it down, I caught a whiff of that strange smell again. It reminded me of chemicals, like something you'd find in a garage. "Now then," Earl said, leaning forward. "About your car. I'm pretty handy with engines. Why don't I take a look at it in the morning? It's too dark now, and these roads can be dangerous at night." Sarah and I exchanged glances. The thought of spending the night here made me uneasy, but the alternative, walking back to our car in the dark, seemed even less appealing. "That's very kind of you," Sarah said cautiously, "but we wouldn't want to impose. If we could just use your phone to call for a tow truck." "Oh, I'm afraid our phone line's been down for days," Martha chimed in, her smile never wavering. "Terrible service out here, you know. But don't you worry, we have plenty of room. You can stay in the guest bedroom upstairs." As she spoke, I noticed a dark stain on her apron. It looked fresh, and in the dim light, it appeared almost red. Earl must have noticed me staring because he quickly stood up, blocking my view of Martha. "Well, it's settled then. You'll stay the night, and we'll sort out your car in the morning. Now, how about some dinner? Martha makes a mean stew." The mention of food made my stomach growl, reminding me that we hadn't eaten since lunch. Despite my unease, I found myself nodding. As we followed them to the dining room, I whispered to Sarah, "Something feels off about this place." She nodded slightly. "I know. But what choice do we have? Let's just get through the night and leave first thing in the morning." The dining room was as cluttered as the rest of the house. The table was set with mismatched plates and tarnished silverware. Martha ladled out bowls of thick, dark stew that smelled surprisingly good. As we ate, Earl regaled us with stories about the farm and the surrounding area. He seemed to know every inch of the forest, describing hidden caves and forgotten trails with vivid detail. "You know," he said, his eyes glinting in the candlelight, "people have been known to disappear in these woods. Hikers, campers, even the occasional lost traveler." I felt Sarah stiffen beside me. Earl's tone was casual, almost cheerful, but there was an undercurrent of something, a warning, a threat. Martha tittered nervously. "Oh, Earl, don't scare our guests with those old stories. I'm sure they're tired and would like to get some rest." As if on cue, I felt a wave of drowsiness wash over me. My limbs felt heavy, and I had to fight to keep my eyes open. I glanced at Sarah and saw that she was struggling too, her head nodding forward slightly. Alarm bells started ringing in my head, but they seemed far away, muffled. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't cooperate. I think we should go to bed," I managed to slur out. Earl's smile widened, showing too many teeth. Of course. Martha, why don't you show our guests to their room?" The trip up the stairs was a blur. I vaguely remember Martha's constant chatter as she led us to a small, musty bedroom with a single bed. As soon as she left, Sarah and I collapsed onto the mattress, too groggy to do anything but succumb to the encroaching darkness. I don't know how long I slept, but I woke with a start, my head pounding. The room was pitch black, and for a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came rushing back. The car, the farmhouse, Earl and Martha. I fumbled for my phone, using its dim light to check the time. 3:17 a.m. Sarah was still asleep beside me, her breathing deep and even. That's when I heard it. Voices, muffled but audible, coming from somewhere below us. I strained to listen, catching snippets of conversation. "Perfect condition. Fetch a good price. Have to move quickly. My blood ran cold as the implications of what I was hearing sank in. We needed to get out of here, now. I shook Sarah awake, clamping a hand over her mouth to stifle her startled cry. "We have to go," I whispered urgently. "Something's very wrong here." She nodded, her eyes wide with fear. We crept to the door, wincing at every creak of the old floorboards. The hallway was dark and silent, but I could still hear the murmur of voices from downstairs. We made our way down the stairs, pausing at every sound. As we reached the bottom, I saw light spilling from beneath a closed door. The basement, I realized. We were almost to the front door when a floorboard let out a loud groan under my foot. The voices in the basement suddenly stopped. "Did you hear that?" Earl's voice, no longer friendly but sharp with suspicion. Sarah and I didn't wait. We bolted for the door, fumbling with the lock. Behind us, I heard the basement door open, followed by rapid footsteps. We burst out into the cool night air, running blindly down the overgrown driveway. I could hear Earl shouting behind us, his words lost in the pounding of my heart. We ran until our lungs burned, not daring to look back. When we finally stopped, gasping for air, we found ourselves back on the road where we'd left our car. To our amazement, the car started on the first try. As we sped away, leaving the farmhouse and its sinister occupants far behind, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd narrowly escaped a fate worse than a broken-down car on a lonely road. We drove in silence for a long time, both of us processing what had happened. It wasn't until we saw the lights of the next town that Sarah finally spoke. "Jack," she said, her voice shaky, "what do you think they were going to do to us?" I shook my head, not wanting to voice the terrible possibilities that had been running through my mind. "I don't know, and I don't want to know. Let's just be grateful we got out of there." As we pulled into a well-lit gas station, surrounded by the comforting signs of civilization, I made a silent vow. No matter how long the detour, no matter how inconvenient, we would never again seek help from strangers on a dark, lonely road. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No birds chirping, no leaves rustling, just an eerie stillness that seemed to swallow every sound. I had been hiking for hours, my boots crunching over fallen leaves and twigs, but now even that seemed muffled. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. I checked my phone again. Still no signal. The GPS had stopped working about an hour ago, leaving me with nothing but a vague sense that I was heading in the right direction. The sun was sinking lower in the sky, painting the trees with long shadows that seemed to reach for me like grasping fingers. I should have turned back when I realized I was lost. Should have retraced my steps and found my way to the marked trail. But something kept pulling me forward, a mixture of stubbornness and curiosity that I would soon regret. As the light faded, I spotted a flicker of brightness through the trees. Hope surged through me. Maybe it was a ranger station or a campsite. I quickened my pace, pushing through the underbrush towards the light. What I found instead made me stop in my tracks. Nestled in a clearing was a collection of ramshackle buildings, their windows glowing with warm, inviting light. Smoke curled from crooked chimneys, and I could hear the faint murmur of voices carried on the evening breeze. Relief washed over me. I had found people, civilization of a sort. They could help me get back to my car, or at least point me in the right direction. I stepped into the clearing, waving to catch someone's attention. The reaction was immediate and unsettling. The voices cut off abruptly, and I saw curtains twitch in windows as faces peered out at me. A door creaked open, and a man stepped out onto a porch, his weathered face set in a wary frown. "Evening," I called out, trying to keep my voice friendly and non-threatening. "I'm sorry to intrude, but I've gotten a bit turned around on the trails. I was hoping you could point me back to the main road." The man didn't respond immediately. His eyes, dark and deep-set, scanned me from head to toe. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, as if unused to conversation. "Ain't no roads around here, stranger. This is Piney Grove. We don't get many visitors." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cooling evening air. Something about the way he said visitors made it sound like a dirty word. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to trespass," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. "If you could just give me directions to the nearest town, I'll be on my way." The man's frown deepened. "Nearest town's a fair ways off. Getting dark soon. Ain't safe in these woods at night." As if on cue, I heard a distant howl that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. It didn't sound like any wolf or coyote I'd ever heard. The man seemed to come to a decision. "Reckon you better come inside. We'll sort you out in the morning." Part of me wanted to refuse, to turn and run back into the forest, but the rational part of my brain knew that would be suicide. I was lost. It was getting dark, and who knew what kind of animals were out there? Reluctantly, I nodded and followed him towards one of the larger buildings. As we walked, I noticed more people emerging from the other houses. They watched me with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, their faces gaunt and pale in the fading light. Children peered around their parents' legs, their eyes wide and unblinking. The inside of the building was dimly lit by oil lamps, casting flickering shadows on walls covered in faded floral wallpaper. The furniture looked ancient, as if it had been passed down through generations. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke and something else. Something earthy and slightly sweet that I couldn't quite place. "Name's Ezekiel," the man said, gesturing for me to sit at a worn wooden table. "This here's my wife, Martha." A thin woman with long gray hair nodded at me from near the fireplace. Her eyes never left me as she stirred something in a large pot hanging over the flames. "I'm Lisa," I said, forcing a smile. "Thank you for your hospitality." Ezekiel grunted in response. "You'll stay here tonight. In the morning, we'll see about getting you back where you came from." I wanted to protest, to insist on leaving right away, but I knew it would be pointless. I was at their mercy, at least for now. Martha ladled some stew into a chipped bowl and set it in front of me. The smell made my stomach growl, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since that morning. I took a cautious bite, surprised by the rich, gamey flavor. "What kind of meat is this?" I asked, more to break the uncomfortable silence than out of real curiosity. "Best not to ask questions you don't want answers to," Ezekiel replied, his tone making it clear that the subject was closed. As I ate, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong here. The way Ezekiel and Martha watched me, the strange silence from outside, the odd smell that seemed to permeate everything, it all added up to a sense of wrongness that made my skin crawl. After dinner, Martha showed me to a small room upstairs. The bed was lumpy, and the blankets smelled musty, but I was too exhausted to care. I lay down, fully clothed, and tried to sleep. I must have dozed off because I woke with a start, disoriented in the unfamiliar darkness. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then it all came flooding back. The hike, getting lost, finding Piney Grove. A noise from outside caught my attention. Voices, low and urgent, drifted up from below. I crept to the window, careful not to make any noise, and peered out. In the moonlight, I could see a group of people gathered in the center of the clearing. They were dressed in long robes, their faces hidden by hoods. In the center of the circle stood Ezekiel, his arms raised as he spoke in a language I didn't recognize. My heart pounded in my chest as I watched the strange ritual unfold. What kind of place had I stumbled into? Suddenly, one of the robed figures looked up, straight at my window. I ducked down, praying they hadn't seen me. I waited, barely breathing, for what felt like hours. When I finally dared to look again, the clearing was empty. Sleep was impossible after that. I lay in bed, every creak of the old house making me jump. As soon as the first light of dawn crept through the window, I made my decision. I had to get out of here. I eased the door open, wincing at every squeak of the hinges. The house was silent as I crept down the stairs, my heart in my throat. I had just reached the front door when a voice behind me made me freeze. "Leavin'? So soon?" I turned slowly to see Ezekiel standing at the foot of the stairs, his eyes glittering in the dim light. I thought I'd get an early start," I stammered, reaching for the door handle. Ezekiel took a step towards me. "Ain't polite to leave without saying goodbye, especially when you've seen things you shouldn't." My blood ran cold. "I didn't see anything," I lied, my voice shaking. "Please, I just want to go home." He shook his head slowly. "I'm afraid that ain't possible. You see, Piney Grove has ways of dealing with outsiders who learn our secrets." I didn't wait to hear more. I yanked the door open and ran, my feet pounding on the dirt as I sprinted towards the trees. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the sound of pursuit. I ran blindly through the forest, branches whipping at my face, roots threatening to trip me with every step. The strange, howling cry I had heard the night before echoed through the trees, closer now, and filled with a hungry eagerness that sent chills down my spine. I don't know how long I ran. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but terror kept me moving. The sounds of pursuit faded, but I didn't slow down. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still after me, something that didn't need to run to catch its prey. Just when I thought I couldn't go on, I burst out of the trees onto a paved road. A car was approaching, and I waved my arms frantically, not caring how crazy I must look. The car screeched to a halt, and an elderly couple peered out at me in concern. "Are you all right, dear?" the woman asked, taking in my wild appearance. I glanced back at the forest. There was no sign of pursuit, but I could feel eyes watching me from the shadows between the trees. "Please," I gasped, "I need to get out of here. Can you give me a ride to the nearest town?" They hesitated for only a moment before nodding, and I scrambled into the back seat. As we drove away, I kept my eyes on the receding tree line, half expecting to see robed figures emerge from the forest, but there was nothing, just trees and shadows, hiding whatever secrets lay within. I never reported what happened in Piney Grove. Who would believe me? Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that strange howl in my dreams, and I wake up in a cold sweat, grateful for the familiar sounds of the city around me. But I know the truth. Out there, deep in the forest where no roads lead, Piney Grove is waiting, and I pray that no other lost hiker ever stumbles upon its secrets. The flickering fluorescent light cast an eerie glow over the empty lab. At 2 a.m., I should have been the only one there. But when I heard footsteps echoing down the hallway, I knew my quiet night of research was about to take an unsettling turn. I'd been burning the midnight oil for weeks, poring over data and running simulations for my thesis. The lab had become a second home, its familiar hum of equipment and faint chemical smell oddly comforting. Tonight, though, that comfort vanished the moment I realized I wasn't alone. The footsteps grew louder, more deliberate. I held my breath, eyes fixed on the door. It swung open, revealing a figure I recognized but didn't expect. Dr. Reeves, my thesis advisor's colleague. "Ah, Sarah," he said, his voice unnaturally cheerful for the late hour. "I thought I might find you here." I forced a smile, trying to hide my unease. "Dr. Reeves, I didn't expect anyone else to be working so late." He stepped into the lab, closing the door behind him. The soft click of the latch felt oddly final. "Oh, you know how it is," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Sometimes the best ideas come at night." I nodded, turning back to my computer screen in the hope he'd take the hint and leave. But instead, I felt him move closer, peering over my shoulder at the data sprawled across my monitor. "Well, fascinating work you're doing here," he murmured, his breath uncomfortably warm on my neck. "Remind me again, what's the focus of your research?" I shifted in my chair, putting some distance between us. "It's a new approach to data encryption," I explained, keeping my voice neutral, "using quantum entanglement to create unbreakable codes." His eyes lit up with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "Unbreakable codes, you say? Now that's interesting. Very interesting indeed." Something in his tone set off alarm bells in my head. Dr. Reeves had always been polite but distant in our previous interactions. This sudden interest felt wrong, almost predatory. "It's still early stages," I said, minimizing the window on my screen. "Lots of work to do before it's anywhere near practical application." He chuckled, a low sound that raised the hair on the back of my neck. "Oh, I'm sure, but even early-stage research can be, valuable. To the right people, of course." My heart began to race. Was he implying what I thought he was? I stood up, needing to put more space between us. "Well, it's getting late. I should probably head home." Dr. Reeves didn't move. His eyes, usually hidden behind thick glasses, seemed to bore into me. "Before you go, I'd love to take a closer look at your data. Maybe I could offer some insights." I hesitated, my instincts screaming at me to get out. But he was a respected professor, a colleague of my advisor. Refusing outright could have consequences for my academic career. "I appreciate the offer," I said carefully, "but I don't think that would be appropriate. You know how it is with research integrity and all that." His friendly demeanor slipped for a moment, revealing something harder underneath. "Come now, Sarah. We're all colleagues here. Sharing knowledge is what academia is all about, isn't it?" I took a step back, bumping into the lab bench behind me. "Of course, but this is my thesis work. I'm not comfortable sharing the raw data until it's been properly vetted and published." Dr. Reeves' smile didn't reach his eyes. "I understand. But you know, a young researcher like yourself could benefit from additional support, both academic and financial." The implication hung in the air between us. My mouth went dry as I realized the full extent of what was happening. Dr. Reeves wasn't just being nosy or overstepping boundaries. He was trying to steal my research. "I'm doing fine, thank you," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I really need to go." I moved to grab my bag, but he stepped in front of me, blocking my path to the door. "I don't think you understand the opportunity I'm offering you, Sarah. Your work could be revolutionary, but without the right connections, it might never see the light of day. I have those connections. I can make sure your research gets the attention it deserves." My mind raced, trying to find a way out of this situation. I glanced at the emergency exit, but it would trigger an alarm if opened. My phone was in my bag, on the other side of Dr. Reeves. "I appreciate your interest," I said, fighting to keep my voice calm, "but I'm not interested in any outside help. My advisor and I have everything under control." His expression hardened. "Your advisor doesn't understand the potential of what you're working on, but there are people who do. People who would pay handsomely for a peek at your research." The pretense was gone now. He was openly admitting to wanting to sell my work to the highest bidder. I felt a surge of anger cut through my fear. "That's not going to happen," I said firmly. "Now please, let me leave." Dr. Reeves took a step closer, looming over me. "I'm afraid I can't do that. Not until we come to an understanding." My heart pounded in my chest. I was trapped between him and the lab bench, with no clear way out. But as my hand brushed against the cool surface behind me, an idea formed. In one swift motion, I grabbed a beaker of distilled water and threw it in his face. He stumbled back, sputtering and wiping at his eyes. I used the moment of distraction to dart around him, snatching my bag as I ran for the door. "You'll regret this," he shouted behind me. But I was already in the hallway, running as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I reached my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. As I drove away, I could see Dr. Reeves emerge from the building in my rearview mirror, his face contorted with anger. The next few days were a blur of fear and paranoia. I stayed away from the lab, working from home and jumping at every unexpected sound. I knew I had to do something. But the thought of confronting Dr. Reeves or reporting him filled me with dread. What if no one believed me? What if it ruined my academic career? But as the initial shock wore off, anger began to replace fear. This was my research, my hard work. I wasn't going to let someone steal it or intimidate me into giving it up. I set up a meeting with my advisor, Dr. Chen. As I sat in her office, my palms sweating and my heart racing, I told her everything that had happened that night in the lab. To my immense relief, she believed me. More than that, she was furious on my behalf. "This is completely unacceptable," she said, her usually calm demeanor replaced by righteous anger. "We're going to the dean with this immediately." What followed was a whirlwind of meetings, investigations, and uncomfortable confrontations. Dr. Reeves denied everything at first, but faced with the evidence, including security camera footage from the lab that night, he eventually confessed. It turned out I wasn't his first victim. Other students and researchers came forward with similar stories of pressure and attempted theft. The scandal rocked the department, leading to Dr. Reeves' dismissal and a complete overhaul of research security protocols. As for me, I threw myself back into my work with renewed determination. The experience had shaken me, but it had also shown me the value of what I was doing. If people were willing to go to such lengths to steal it, then it must be worth protecting and pursuing. Months later, as I stood at the podium presenting my completed thesis, I felt a sense of triumph that went beyond academic achievement. I had faced a threat to my work and my integrity, and I had come out stronger for it. The applause that followed my presentation was sweet, but the real victory was in knowing that the research was mine, earned through hard work and perseverance in the face of adversity. As I left the auditorium, Dr. Chen caught up with me, a proud smile on her face. "Brilliant work, Sarah," she said. "You know, we've received some interesting inquiries about potential applications for your encryption method, completely above board, of course." I grinned, feeling a mix of excitement and vindication. "That's great news. I can't wait to see where this research goes next." As we walked out into the bright sunlight, I felt a sense of optimism about the future. The path ahead might not always be easy or straightforward, but I knew now that I had the strength to face whatever challenges came my way. The incident with Dr. Reeves had taught me a valuable lesson. In the world of cutting-edge research, knowledge truly is power. And sometimes, protecting that knowledge is just as important as discovering it in the first place. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the highway into a blurry mess of headlights and reflections. I squinted through the windshield, my wipers working overtime but barely making a dent in the downpour. That's when I saw him, a lone figure on the side of the road, thumb out, looking as drenched and miserable as a stray cat caught in a storm. I don't usually pick up hitchhikers. It's not the safest thing to do these days, but something about the way he stood there, shoulders hunched against the rain, made me slow down. Before I could talk myself out of it, I was pulling over to the shoulder, the car's tires splashing through puddles. The man jogged over, his face hidden beneath the hood of a dark jacket. As he opened the passenger door, letting in a gust of wind and rain, I caught a glimpse of a scruffy beard and grateful eyes. "Thanks," he said, his voice gruff but not unfriendly. "Didn't think anyone would stop in this weather." I nodded, trying to shake off the nagging feeling that I might be making a mistake. "Where are you headed?" "Just down the road a ways," he replied vaguely, settling into the seat. "Wherever you're going is fine." As I pulled back onto the highway, I snuck a glance at my new passenger. He was older than I'd first thought, maybe in his 50s, with deep lines etched into his weathered face. His clothes were worn but clean, and he didn't give off the unsettling vibe I'd expect from someone dangerous. We drove in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the steady drumming of rain on the roof and the swish of the wipers. I was just starting to relax when he spoke again. "So, Mark, how long have you lived in Cedar Grove?" I felt my body tense, my hands gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. I hadn't told him my name, and I certainly hadn't mentioned where I lived. "How did you know that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He chuckled, a low sound that sent a chill down my spine. "Oh, I know a lot of things about you, Mark. I know you work at the bank on Main Street. I know you have a golden retriever named Max. And I know your wife, Sarah, is probably wondering why you're running late tonight." My mind raced. How could he possibly know all this? I'd never seen this man before in my life. Cedar Grove was a small town, sure, but not so small that everyone knew everyone else's business. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my best efforts to stay calm. He turned to face me, and in the dim light from the dashboard, his eyes seemed to gleam with an unnatural intensity. "Just a traveler, passing through. But I make it my business to know things about people. It's amazing what you can learn if you just pay attention." I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to slam on the brakes and order him out of the car. But we were in the middle of nowhere, the rain still coming down in torrents, and something told me this man wouldn't leave quietly if asked. "What do you want?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. He smiled, a gesture that didn't reach his eyes. "Want? I don't want anything, Mark. I'm just making conversation. Isn't that what people do on long car rides?" I didn't respond, my mind whirling with possibilities. Was he some kind of stalker, a criminal who had been watching me, planning some kind of elaborate scheme? "You're wondering how I know so much about you," he said, as if reading my thoughts. "It's simpler than you might think. Your name tag is still on your shirt. You forgot to take it off after work. The dog hair on your pants suggests a large breed, and I saw the golden retriever bumper sticker on your car. As for Sarah, well, you've been checking your phone at every red light. It doesn't take a genius to figure out you're running late and someone's waiting for you." His explanation was logical, but it did little to ease my fear. There was still something off about the whole situation, something that made my skin crawl. "That doesn't explain how you knew where I live," I said, trying to keep my eyes on the road while also watching him in my peripheral vision. He shrugged. "Cedar Grove Bank isn't exactly a national chain. Took an educated guess based on your work shirt." I wanted to believe him, wanted to think this was all just a strange coincidence, a series of lucky guesses, but the knot in my stomach told me otherwise. "Look," I said, spotting a gas station up ahead. "I think this is far enough. I'm going to pull over and you can—" "I wouldn't do that if I were you, Mark," he interrupted, his voice suddenly hard. "We're not done talking yet." I felt a flash of anger cut through my fear. "This is my car. I get to decide when the ride is over." He laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Oh, Mark, you gave up that control the moment you let me in. But don't worry, I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to talk." "About what?" I asked, my mouth dry. "About choices," he said, leaning back in his seat. "About the decisions we make and the consequences that follow. For instance, your decision to embezzle money from the bank. Small amounts in here and there. Nothing anyone would notice right away. But it adds up, doesn't it?" My blood ran cold. There was no way he could know about that. I'd been so careful, covering my tracks, making sure the numbers always balanced out. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. He turned to look at me, his eyes boring into mine. "Don't insult my intelligence, Mark. We both know the truth. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. "Are you blackmailing me? Is that what this is?" He shook his head, looking almost disappointed. "Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of this as an opportunity, a chance for you to make things right before it's too late." "What do you mean?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "The bank is conducting an audit next week," he said casually, as if discussing the weather. "They're going to find the discrepancies. And when they do, your comfortable life in Cedar Grove will come crashing down. Unless—" He let the word hang in the air between us. I knew I shouldn't ask, shouldn't engage with this stranger who seemed to know far too much about my life and my mistakes. But I couldn't help myself. "Unless what?" "Unless you turn yourself in," he said simply. "Go to your boss first thing tomorrow morning. Confess everything. Pay back what you took. It won't be easy, but it'll be a lot better than waiting for them to discover it on their own." I laughed bitterly. And why would I do that, eh? Why should I believe anything you say? He sighed, reaching into his jacket pocket. I tensed, half expecting him to pull out a weapon. Instead, he produced a small, leather-bound notebook. "Because I have proof," he said, flipping it open. "Dates, amounts, account numbers, everything they'll need to convict you. I'm giving you a chance to get ahead of this, Mark, a chance you don't deserve, but one I'm offering nonetheless." My mind reeled. How had he gotten this information? Who was he really? But even as these questions swirled in my head, I knew he was right. The audit would expose everything, and if I didn't act first, I'd lose far more than just my job. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you care what happens to me?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the rain-slicked road ahead. When he spoke, his voice was softer, almost sad. "Let's just say I've been where you are, Mark. Made the same mistakes. Thought I could outsmart the system. I learned the hard way that there's always a reckoning. I'm trying to save you from that pain." We drove in silence for several minutes, the weight of his words settling over me like a heavy blanket. As we approached the outskirts of Cedar Grove, I knew I had a decision to make. "There's a diner up ahead," I said finally. "I'll drop you off there." He nodded, seemingly satisfied. As I pulled into the diner's parking lot, he gathered his things, preparing to step back out into the rain. "Remember, Mark," he said, his hand on the door handle. "First thing tomorrow morning. It's your only chance." Before I could respond, he was gone, disappearing into the stormy night as quickly as he had appeared. I sat there for a long time, the engine idling, rain pattering on the roof. Finally, I pulled out my phone and dialed Sarah's number. "Hey," I said when she answered, my voice thick with emotion. "I'm on my way home. But I need to talk to you about something important when I get there." As I hung up and put the car in drive, I felt a strange mix of dread and relief. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, I felt like I was heading in the right direction. The mysterious hitchhiker had given me a second chance. Now it was up to me to make the most of it. The crack of a twig snapping jolted me from my peaceful reverie. I froze, my marshmallow-laden stick hovering over the campfire. The dense forest around me, which had seemed so inviting during the day, now loomed ominously in the gathering dusk. I held my breath, straining to hear over the crackling of the fire. There it was again, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, too heavy and deliberate to be an animal. I'd come to these woods alone, seeking solitude and a break from the chaos of city life. Now, as fear crept up my spine, I was acutely aware of just how isolated I truly was. Slowly, I set down my stick and reached for the flashlight beside me. The beam cut through the encroaching darkness, illuminating the dense undergrowth at the edge of my campsite. Shadows danced between the trees, and for a moment, I thought I saw a figure duck behind a large oak. "Hello?" I called out, hating how my voice quavered. "Is someone there?" Silence answered me, broken only by the gentle rustle of leaves in the evening breeze. I stood up, my legs shaky beneath me. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the solitude was getting to me, making me jumpy. But then I saw it. A flash of movement just beyond the circle of my flashlight's beam. My heart leapt into my throat as I caught a glimpse of a dark shape moving through the trees, keeping to the shadows. Fight or flight instinct kicked in, and I chose flight. I doused the fire as quickly as I could, plunging the campsite into darkness. Fumbling in the dim light of my flashlight, I grabbed my backpack and started shoving in whatever I could reach. My water bottle, a bag of trail mix, my map. The sound of footsteps grew closer, no longer trying to be stealthy. Whoever was out there knew I had spotted them. They were coming. I abandoned the rest of my gear and took off into the woods, my flashlight bobbing wildly as I ran. Branches whipped at my face and roots seemed to reach up to trip me. but fear propelled me forward, deeper into the unfamiliar forest. After what felt like hours but was probably only minutes, I stopped, gasping for breath. I leaned against a tree, trying to orient myself. In my panic, I had run blindly, with no thought to direction or landmarks. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I was lost. I fumbled in my backpack for my map and compass, but in the chaos of my hasty departure, I must have left them behind. My phone was useless out here with no signal and a rapidly draining battery. A twig snapped nearby, and I stifled a scream. They were still following me. How? How could they track me so easily in this darkness? I took off again, no longer caring about the noise I made. My pursuer seemed to know exactly where I was anyway. My lungs burned, and my legs ached, but terror kept me moving. Suddenly, the ground disappeared from beneath my feet. I tumbled down a steep embankment, leaves and twigs scratching my skin as I rolled. I came to a stop at the bottom, the wind knocked out of me. For a moment, I lay there, dazed and struggling to breathe. Then I heard it, the sound of someone carefully making their way down the slope after me. Panic gave me strength. I staggered to my feet, ignoring the pain in my ankle, and limped forward. I found myself in a small clearing, the trees opening up to reveal a sky full of stars. In any other circumstance, it would have been beautiful. My flashlight flickered, the beam growing weaker. I shook it desperately, but it was no use. The light died, leaving me in near total darkness. A branch cracked at the edge of the clearing. I spun around, my eyes straining to see in the dim starlight. A figure stood there, just a silhouette against the darker backdrop of the forest. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice raw with fear and exhaustion. The figure took a step forward. "I want you to listen," a deep voice replied. I backed away, my hands held out in front of me. "Stay back, I have a weapon." It was a pathetic bluff, but it was all I had. The man, for I could now see it was a man, stopped. "No, you don't," he said, his tone almost gentle. "You left everything behind at your campsite, including this." He held up something that glinted in the starlight. My hunting knife. My stomach dropped. He had been to my campsite, had gone through my things. How long had he been watching me? "Who are you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Why are you doing this?" He took another step forward, and I could make out more details now. He was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothing that blended with the night. His face was obscured by a beard and the shadow of a cap. "My name isn't important," he said. "What's important is why you're here, Alice." I felt as if the ground had dropped out from under me again. He knew my name. How could he possibly know my name? "How do you know who you are?" he finished for me. "I know a lot about you, Alice. I know you're running from something, or someone." My mind raced. Was he a private investigator? Had David hired someone to find me? As if reading my thoughts, the man shook his head. "I'm not working for your ex-husband, if that's what you're thinking. I'm here to help you." "Help me," I laughed, the sound bordering on hysterical. "By chasing me through the woods in the middle of the night." The first night in our new home, I woke to the sound of children laughing. It was faint, almost dreamlike, but unmistakable. The thing is, we didn't have any children. My wife, Sarah, and I had just moved into the old Johnson farmhouse on the outskirts of town. It was a beautiful place. All weathered wood and wraparound porch, set on 10 acres of rolling hills and ancient oak trees. We'd gotten it for a steal, the real estate agent practically giddy as she handed over the keys. "It's a special place," she'd said, her smile just a touch too wide. "I'm sure you'll be very happy here." Now, as I lay in bed listening to the phantom giggles echoing through the halls, I wasn't so sure. I nudged Sarah awake. "Do you hear that?" I whispered. She blinked at me sleepily. "Hear what?" The laughter faded away, leaving only the creaks and groans of the old house settling. I shook my head. Nothing. Must have been dreaming. But I wasn't dreaming, and that was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, strange occurrences became our new normal. Items would move on their own, appearing in places we knew we hadn't left them. The temperature would drop suddenly in certain rooms, cold spots that made your breath fog even on the warmest days. And always, there was the laughter. Sarah tried to rationalize it all. The moving objects were just us being forgetful in a new place. The cold spots were drafts in an old house. The laughter was probably just kids from a neighboring farm, sound carrying far in the country quiet. I wanted to believe her, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. It came to a head about a month after we moved in. I was in the attic, unpacking some of the last boxes, when I found the journal. It was old, the leather cover cracked and faded, tucked away behind a loose board in the wall. Curious, I opened it. The handwriting inside was spidery and difficult to read, but as I deciphered the words, a chill ran down my spine. It was a diary, belonging to Margaret Johnson, the matriarch of the family who had built this house over a century ago, and what she described was horrifying. According to Margaret, the land the house was built on was cursed. The local Native American tribe had warned the Johnsons not to build here, that it was a sacred place, a thin spot between worlds. But Thomas Johnson was a stubborn man, and he ignored their warnings. At first, everything seemed fine, but then their children started to change. They became withdrawn, speaking of imaginary friends and games played in empty rooms. Margaret wrote of hearing laughter when no one was there, of toys moving on their own, of shadowy figures glimpsed out of the corner of her eye. And then, one by one, the children disappeared. The last entry was dated 1920. Margaret's handwriting was frantic, barely legible. "They're coming for me now," she wrote. "I can hear them laughing. God forgive us for what we've done." I closed the journal, my hands shaking. It had to be some kind of sick joke, right? A prop left behind by the previous owners to scare new residents. But as I stood there, the attic suddenly felt colder, and I could have sworn I heard a child's giggle right behind me. I practically fell down the attic stairs in my haste to get out. I found Sarah in the kitchen, humming as she prepared dinner. The normality of the scene was jarring after what I'd just read. "Sarah," I said, my voice trembling, "we need to talk about the house." I told her everything, the journal, the curse, the disappearing children. As I spoke, her face grew pale, and I could see the doubt in her eyes warring with the fear she'd been trying to ignore. "Tom," she said slowly, I think I've seen them." She told me about the figures she'd glimpsed in mirrors, always just at the edge of her vision, the way she sometimes felt watched, even when she was alone in the house. The dreams she'd been having, of children calling out to her, begging for help. We sat there in stunned silence, the implications of what we'd discovered settling over us like a heavy blanket. What were we supposed to do now? Call an exorcist, put the house back on the market, and hope some other unsuspecting couple would buy it. Before we could decide on a course of action, the lights flickered. The temperature in the kitchen plummeted, our breath suddenly visible in the air, and then we heard it, the laughter, louder than ever before, coming from every direction at once. Sarah grabbed my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Tom," she whispered, "we need to get out of here, now." We ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The knob turned, but it was as if something on the other side was holding it shut. We tried the back door, the windows, even the cellar entrance, all locked, all immovable. The laughter grew louder, mixed now with the sound of running feet and childish voices calling out to us. "Play with us," they said. "Stay with us forever." We ended up huddled in the living room, watching in horror as objects began to move on their own. Books flew off shelves, furniture slid across the floor, and all the while, those voices kept calling to us. It was Sarah who found the solution. As a chair whizzed past her head, she spotted something glinting on the mantelpiece. It was an old arrowhead, probably Native American, displayed as a curio by a previous owner. The journal, she gasped. It said this was sacred land. Maybe. She didn't need to finish the thought. I lunged for the arrowhead, snatching it just as an unseen force tried to pull it away. The moment my fingers closed around it, everything stopped. The flying objects dropped to the floor, the laughter cut off abruptly, and the oppressive cold dissipated. We didn't wait to see if it was truly over. The front door swung open easily now, and we ran to our car, still in our pajamas, the arrowhead clutched tightly in my hand. We drove through the night, not stopping until we were 2 states away. We never went back to the farmhouse. We hired a company to pack up our belongings and sell the place, making sure to include the arrowhead and Margaret's journal with the property. We also made them promise to disclose the house's history to any potential buyers. Last I heard, the place is still on the market. The real estate agent calls it a charming fixer-upper with a rich history. Sarah and I call it a nightmare we barely escaped. Sometimes, late at night, I still wake up thinking I hear children laughing. But now, in our new home in the city, surrounded by the comforting sounds of traffic and neighbors, I can convince myself it's just a dream. Most of the time, anyway. We don't talk much about what happened in that house. It's easier to pretend it was all some shared delusion, a product of stress and an overactive imagination. But we both know the truth. And we both know that sometimes, the most haunting things aren't the ghosts themselves, but the questions they leave behind. Why us? Why that house? And what happened to those children? All those years ago. I don't think we'll ever know the answers. And maybe that's for the best. Some mysteries are better left unsolved, some doors better left unopened. All I know is, if you're ever driving through the countryside and you see an old farmhouse for sale, one that seems just a little too perfect, a little too cheap, keep driving, because you never know what might be waiting inside, laughing in the darkness, ready to welcome you home. The neon sign flickered weakly in the rain, casting an eerie red glow over the empty parking lot. Mario's Pizza, it read, the NZ sputtering in and out of existence like a dying firefly. I sighed, glancing at the clock on my dashboard, 11:47 p.m. Just one more delivery and I could call it a night. I'd been driving for Mario's for about 6 months now, a job I'd taken to help pay for college. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid the bills and usually wasn't too eventful. Usually. The pizza box sat on the passenger seat, steam still rising from the vents. The address was way out on the edge of our delivery zone, a part of town I wasn't too familiar with. As I pulled out of the lot, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this delivery felt off. The rain intensified as I drove, fat droplets splattering against the windshield faster than my wipers could clear them. The streets grew narrower, the houses more spread out. Soon, I was driving down a winding road with dense forest on either side. My GPS chirped, instructing me to turn onto a gravel driveway I almost missed. The path was overgrown, branches scraping against the sides of my car as I inched forward. After what felt like an eternity, the trees opened up to reveal a ramshackle house, its windows dark save for a single light on the second floor. I parked and grabbed the pizza, the box already growing cold in the damp night air. As I approached the front door, the porch steps creaked ominously beneath my feet. I raised my hand to knock, but before I could, the door swung open. The man who stood there made me take an involuntary step back. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with a wild beard and eyes that seemed to bore right through me. He wore a stained wife-beater and jeans that had seen better days. Pizza delivery," I stammered, holding out the box. The man's face split into a grin that didn't reach his eyes. "Right on time," he said, his voice a low growl. "Why don't you bring that inside? I've got to grab my wallet." Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my car and drive away as fast as I could. But I was new to this job, and I didn't want to risk getting fired over a misunderstanding. So, Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The interior of the house was dark and cluttered. The air was thick with the smell of cigarette smoke and something else. Something metallic that made my nose wrinkle. The man led me through a narrow hallway into what I assumed was the living room. "Set it down there," he said, gesturing to a coffee table littered with empty beer cans and overflowing ashtrays. "I'll be right back with the money." He disappeared up a creaky staircase, leaving me alone in the dim room. My heart was pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it. I glanced around, looking for a quick exit if I needed one. That's when I saw it. In the far corner of the room, partially hidden behind a ratty armchair, was a duffel bag. It was unzipped, and poking out of it was something that made my blood run cold, the barrel of a gun. I froze, my mind racing. This wasn't just some eccentric customer. Something was very, very wrong here. I had to get out. I turned to leave, but before I could take a step, I heard the man's heavy footsteps coming back down the stairs. Panic seized me. I couldn't let him know I'd seen the gun. I had to act normal. The man reappeared, a wad of crumpled bills in his hand. "Here you go, kid," he said, holding out the money. "Keep the change." My hand shook as I reached for the cash. As I did, I noticed dark stains on his knuckles, stains that looked suspiciously like dried blood. "Thanks," I managed to croak out. "Have a good night." I turned to leave, trying to keep my pace steady even though every fiber of my being was screaming at me to run. I was almost to the front door when I heard it, a muffled thump from upstairs, followed by what sounded like a strangled cry. The man's hand clamped down on my shoulder, his grip like iron. "You hear something, boy?" I shook my head, not trusting my voice. My eyes darted to the door, tantalizingly close yet impossibly far. "Good," he said, his tone menacing. "Because there's nothing to hear. Now why don't you get on home? It's late, and these roads can be dangerous at night." He practically shoved me out the door, slamming it behind me. I stumbled down the porch steps, my legs feeling like jelly. The moment I reached my car, I fumbled with the keys, my hands shaking so badly I could barely get them into the ignition. As I reversed down the driveway, my headlights swept across the house one last time. And there, in the upstairs window, I saw a face. A woman's face, pale and terrified, her mouth open in a silent scream. I floored it, gravel spraying as I peeled out onto the main road. My mind was reeling, trying to process what I'd just seen. The gun, the blood, the woman in the window. It all added up to a horrifying conclusion. I needed to call the police. But as I reached for my phone, doubt crept in. What if I was wrong? What if it was all just a misunderstanding? My imagination running wild. I could lose my job, or worse, get in trouble for making a false report. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white. I had to make a decision. Drive back to the pizzeria and pretend nothing happened, or potentially save someone's life. In the end, it wasn't really a choice at all. I dialed 911, my voice shaky as I relayed what I'd seen to the dispatcher. They told me to drive to the nearest police station and wait there. The next few hours were a blur of questions and statements. I told the police everything: the gun, the blood, the woman in the window. They seemed to take it seriously, especially when I gave them the address. It wasn't until the next morning that I found out the full story. The man, it turned out, was wanted in connection with a string of disappearances across 3 states. When the police raided the house, they found evidence of multiple victims. And the woman I saw, she was still alive, held captive in an upstairs bedroom. If I hadn't made that delivery, if I hadn't called the police, she likely wouldn't have survived another day. The following weeks were chaotic. There were more interviews with detectives, a commendation from the police department, even a few requests for interviews from local news stations. Mario gave me a raise and told me I could take as much time off as I needed. But even as the dust settled and life began to return to normal, I couldn't shake the memory of that night. The flickering neon sign, The rain-slicked roads, the face in the window. It all haunted my dreams. I kept delivering pizzas, though. Something about the job felt different now. More important somehow. Every delivery could be someone's lifeline. Every interaction a chance to make a difference. And every time I pull up to a house I've never been to before, every time I knock on a stranger's door, I'm acutely aware of the thin line between ordinary and extraordinary, between a routine delivery and a life-changing event. Because sometimes, the most important moments of our lives come disguised as the most mundane. Sometimes, a simple pizza delivery can change everything. The lock clicked open with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. As the door swung inward, revealing the rustic interior of our rented cabin, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were stepping into something we couldn't easily escape. If only I'd known then how right that feeling was. Home sweet home for the next week, my boyfriend, Matt, said cheerfully, lugging our bags over the threshold. I followed him in, taking in the cozy living room with its stone fireplace and the small kitchenette beyond. It was charming, in that quaint, middle-of-nowhere sort of way. We'd found the listing online, a secluded cabin in the woods, perfect for a romantic getaway. The photos showed stunning views of the surrounding forest and promised a peaceful retreat from our hectic city lives. The price had been almost too good to be true, but we jumped at the chance. Now, standing in the actual space, I felt a tinge of unease. The air inside was stuffy and smelled faintly of mildew. The furniture, while clean, had a worn look that spoke of years of use. And was it my imagination, or did the floorboards creak a little too much under our feet? "Let's open some windows," I suggested, trying to shake off my nerves. "It's a bit musty in here." Matt nodded, moving to the nearest window. He struggled with it for a moment before it finally budged, sliding up with a protesting groan. "Guess they don't open these much," he joked. I forced a smile, but something about the way the window had resisted bothered me. It was almost as if it didn't want to be opened. We spent the rest of the afternoon settling in, unpacking our clothes and stocking the small fridge with the groceries we'd brought. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows through the trees, Matt lit a fire in the fireplace. The warmth and flickering light helped ease some of my tension. "See, this isn't so bad," Matt said, wrapping an arm around me as we sat on the worn sofa. "Just what we needed to relax and reconnect." I leaned into him, wanting to believe it. But as the darkness outside deepened, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every time I glanced at the windows, I half expected to see a face peering in at us. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to get comfortable in the unfamiliar bed. The mattress was lumpy, and the sheets smelled faintly of mothballs. But it wasn't just physical discomfort keeping me awake. There were noises, creaks and groans that seemed too deliberate to be just an old house settling. At one point, I could have sworn I heard footsteps in the hallway outside our room. I lay there, heart pounding, straining to hear, but there was nothing but silence. The next morning, I woke to find Matt already up and making coffee in the kitchenette. "Sleep well?" he asked, handing me a steaming mug. I shook my head, taking a sip of the strong brew. "Not really. This place makes weird noises at night," he chuckled. "That's part of the charm, isn't it? The authentic cabin experience," I wanted to argue. To tell him about the footsteps I thought I'd heard, but I didn't want to spoil our vacation with my paranoia. Instead, I suggested we go for a hike after breakfast. The woods around the cabin were beautiful, all towering pines and dappled sunlight. For a few hours, as we trekked along barely visible trails, I forgot about my unease from the night before. But as we made our way back to the cabin, the feeling of being watched returned, stronger than ever. "Matt," I said, grabbing his arm. "Do you see that?" He followed my gaze to a spot between two distant trees. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw a figure standing there, watching us, but when I blinked, it was gone. "See what?" Matt asked, squinting in the direction I was pointing. I shook my head. "Nothing. Must have been a shadow or something. But I knew it wasn't just a shadow. And as we approached the cabin, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The window we had struggled to open yesterday was now firmly shut. "Did you close that last night?" I asked Matt, trying to keep my voice steady. He frowned. "No, I don't think so. Maybe the wind blew it shut." I nodded, not wanting to voice my suspicion that there hadn't been enough wind to move that stubborn window. Besides, if it had blown shut, wouldn't we have heard it? As the day wore on, more strange things began to happen. Items we were sure we'd left in one place would turn up in another. The temperature in certain rooms would drop suddenly, creating cold spots that made no sense in the summer heat. And always, there was that feeling of being watched. That night, as we lay in bed, the noises started again, but this time, they were louder, more insistent. The creaks and groans were joined by a sound like something being dragged across the floor. "Matt," I whispered, shaking him awake. "Do you hear that?" He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Hear what?" But even as he spoke, a loud thump came from the living room, as if something heavy had fallen. Matt's eyes widened. "Okay, I heard that," he said, throwing back the covers. "Stay here. I'll go check it out." "No!" I grabbed his arm. "We should go together." Slowly, we made our way down the hallway, Matt in front with a flashlight he'd grabbed from the nightstand. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. The living room was exactly as we'd left it. "See? Probably just something outside," Matt said, but I could hear the uncertainty in his voice. We were about to head back to bed when I noticed something. On the coffee table, next to the book I'd been reading earlier, was a small, leather-bound journal. I was certain it hadn't been there before. With trembling hands, I picked it up and opened it. The pages were filled with handwritten entries, the ink faded with age. As I skimmed the contents, my heart began to race. It was a diary, belonging to a woman named Eleanor, who had lived in this cabin decades ago. She wrote of strange occurrences, of items moving on their own, of voices in the night. And she wrote of a presence, something dark and malevolent that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The final entry chilled me to the bone. "It's here," Eleanor had written, her usually neat handwriting now a frantic scrawl. "God help me, it's here and I can't escape. If anyone finds this, please, don't stay. Run while you still can." I looked up at Matt, my face pale. "We need to leave. Now." He opened his mouth to argue, but at that moment, every light in the cabin flickered and died. In the sudden darkness, we heard a sound that could only be described as a low, menacing chuckle. We didn't wait to see what would happen next. Grabbing only our phones and car keys, we ran for the door. It resisted at first, as if something was holding it shut, but with a final desperate shove, it flew open. We sprinted to our car, the gravel driveway crunching under our bare feet. As Matt fumbled with the keys, I looked back at the cabin. In the upstairs window, I saw a face, not human, but something twisted and evil, its mouth stretched in a grotesque smile. The engine roared to life and we peeled out of the driveway, tires squealing. We didn't stop driving until we reached the nearest town, where we checked into a motel and spent the rest of the night huddled together, jumping at every sound. In the light of day, it was tempting to dismiss what had happened as an overactive imagination or a shared hallucination. But we both knew what we'd experienced was real. We never went back for our belongings. We contacted the rental company and told them we'd had to leave due to an emergency. They were surprisingly understanding, even offering a partial refund. It wasn't until weeks later, when the nightmares had finally started to subside, that we decided to do some research. What we found made our blood run cold all over again. The cabin had a history, it turned out. Over the years, several renters had fled in the middle of the night, telling tales of supernatural occurrences. And there were those who hadn't fled, whose disappearances remained unsolved mysteries. We count ourselves lucky to have escaped. But sometimes, Late at night, I still feel that watchful presence. And I wonder if, somehow, a piece of whatever was in that cabin followed us home. So if you're ever browsing online, looking for a quaint cabin in the woods for a romantic getaway, be careful. Sometimes, the perfect retreat is too good to be true. And sometimes the things that go bump in the night are all too real. The first sign that something was wrong was the door to the master bedroom. It was closed. I never closed that door, not since I'd started house-sitting for the Wilsons 2 days ago. I stood there, hand hovering over the doorknob, a chill creeping up my spine despite the summer heat. I'd taken this job as a way to make some extra cash during my college break. The Wilsons were loaded. Their sprawling mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured lawns and gardens. It was the kind of place where you'd expect to find a butler named Jeeves, not a 20-year-old student watering plants and feeding cats. "You'll have the run of the place," Mrs. Wilson had said with a laugh as she handed me the keys. "Just don't throw any wild parties while we're gone." As if I knew anyone who'd want to party in this mausoleum of marble and antiques. No, I'd spent most of my time binge-watching shows on their massive TV and raiding their well-stocked fridge. It was supposed to be an easy gig, but now, staring at that closed door, easy was the last word on my mind. I took a deep breath and turned the knob. The door swung open silently, revealing the immaculate master suite. Everything looked normal. The king-sized bed with its mountain of pillows, the chaise lounge by the window, the doors to the walk-in closet and ensuite bathroom. And yet, something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. It was like walking into a perfect replica of a room you know well. Everything looks right, but it doesn't feel right. I shook my head, trying to clear away the paranoia. I was letting my imagination run wild. Probably watched one too many horror movies on that big TV. I was about to leave when I noticed it, a faint scent in the air, something floral and unfamiliar. It wasn't Mrs. Wilson's usual perfume, which lingered on her clothes in the closet. This was different, fresher. My heart began to race. Had someone been in here? I did a quick scan of the room, looking for anything out of place. The jewelry box on the dresser caught my eye. Was it slightly askew? With trembling hands, I opened it. I didn't know much about jewelry, but even I could tell that the glittering diamonds and pearls inside were worth a fortune, and they all seemed to be there. If someone had broken in, why wouldn't they take these? A noise from downstairs made me jump. It sounded like footsteps, but that was impossible. I was alone in the house. The cats were outside. The cleaning service wasn't due for days, and the Wilsons weren't set to return from their European vacation for another week. I crept to the top of the grand staircase, straining my ears. Silence. Maybe I'd imagined it. But then I heard it again. The unmistakable sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Panic seized me. I should run, I thought. Get out of the house and call the police. But curiosity, that deadly impulse that's felled so many horror movie protagonists, got the better of me. I had to know who was down there. As quietly as I could, I made my way down the stairs, grateful for the plush carpet that muffled my footsteps. The noises from the kitchen grew louder. The clink of glasses, the opening and closing of cabinets. It sounded for all the world like someone fixing themselves a drink. I peered around the corner into the kitchen, and my blood ran cold. There, standing at the marble island with his back to me, was a man I'd never seen before. He was tall, well-built, dressed in expensive-looking clothes that seemed at odds with the fact that he was, a burglar. I must have made a sound, a gasp, a whimper, who knows, because suddenly he turned. Our eyes met, and for a moment, we both froze. Then he smiled. It wasn't the menacing grin of a villain caught in the act. It was warm, almost friendly. "Ah," he said, his voice smooth and cultured. "You must be the house sitter. Care for a drink?" I stood there, mouth agape, unable to process what was happening. This man had broken into the house I was supposed to be watching, and he was offering me a drink like we were at a cocktail party. Who? Who are you? I finally managed to stammer out. He chuckled, taking a sip from his glass. On a friend of the family, you could say. Thomas Wilson and I go way back. I frowned. Mr. Wilson had never mentioned any friends having access to the house while they were away. I don't believe you, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I'm calling the police. I reached for my phone, but before I could dial, he spoke again. I wouldn't do that if I were you. Not unless you want Thomas to find out about your little, explorations. I froze. How could he know? I'd been so careful. On my second night here, curiosity had gotten the better of me. I'd started poking around in Mr. Wilson's study, opening drawers, leafing through papers. I told myself I was just being thorough in my house-sitting duties, but deep down, I knew it was wrong. The man smiled again, but this time there was an edge to it. Oh yes, I know all about that. Just like I know about the little joyride you took in the Bentley yesterday. Tsk-tsk. What would the Wilsons say? My mind raced. How could he possibly know these things? Unless, you've been watching me, I said, the realization dawning with a sickening clarity. He raised his glass in a mock toast. Bright girl. Yes, I've been keeping an eye on things, making sure the Wilsons' property is secure. But why? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Who are you really? He set his glass down and leaned against the counter, fixing me with an intense stare. Let's just say I have a vested interest in the Wilsons' affairs, and in making sure certain sensitive information remains private. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure he could hear it. What kind of information? The kind that could ruin a man like Thomas Wilson, he said, his voice low and dangerous. The kind that's worth killing for. I gasped, taking an involuntary step back. You're blackmailing him. He shrugged, the gesture casual, but his eyes never leaving mine. Blackmail is such an ugly word. I prefer to think of it as mutually beneficial arrangement, one that's been working quite well for years now. My mind was reeling. The perfect, wealthy Wilsons. What dark secrets were they hiding? And what had I stumbled into? What happens now? I asked, hating how small and scared my voice sounded. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Now you have a choice to make, my dear. You can forget this ever happened, finish your house-sitting job, and walk away with a nice paycheck and your conscience clear. Or, he let the word hang in the air, heavy with implication. Or what? I whispered. Or you can try to be a hero, call the police, tell the Wilsons what you've seen. But consider this, who do you think they'll believe? A trusted family friend or a college student who's been snooping through their private things and joyriding in their cars? I felt sick. He was right. I had no proof, and I'd abused the Wilsons' trust. Even if they believed me, I'd still be in trouble. So what'll it be? He asked, picking up his glass again. The easy way, or the hard way? I stood there, frozen in indecision. The right thing to do was clear. I should call the police. Consequences be damned. But fear, that primal instinct for self-preservation, held me back. In the end, it wasn't courage or morality that decided it. It was pure, dumb luck. At that moment, headlights swept across the kitchen window. A car was coming up the driveway. The man's eyes widened in surprise. Impossible, he muttered. They're not due back for days. But the sound of car doors slamming, followed by familiar voices, proved him wrong. The Wilsons were home early. In the chaos that followed, the Wilsons' shock at finding an intruder, my fumbling explanations, the man's smooth lies, the truth came out. It wasn't pretty. There were tears, recriminations, threats of legal action. But in the end, justice prevailed. The man, whose real name I never learned, was arrested. The Wilsons' secrets, whatever they were, remained hidden. And me. I lost my house-sitting jobs, of course, but gained something far more valuable, a story I'll never forget, and a lesson about the dangers of curiosity. Now, whenever I pass by a grand house with its manicured lawns and gleaming windows, I can't help but wonder what secrets lie behind those perfect facades. But I've learned my lesson. Some doors are better left unopened, some questions better left unasked, because you never know when you might find yourself caught in the middle of someone else's dangerous game. The security camera feed flickered to life, revealing an empty corridor bathed in the sickly glow of fluorescent lights. I leaned closer to the monitor, my eyes straining in the darkness of the security office. That's when I saw it, a shadow darting across the screen, there and gone in an instant. My heart rate quickened. I was supposed to be alone in this building tonight. My name's Mike, and I've been working the night shift at Grayson Tech for about 6 months now. It's a big, soulless office building on the outskirts of the city, all glass and steel and eerily quiet after hours. Most nights, my biggest challenge is staying awake, but tonight was different. Tonight, something was off. I flipped through the different camera feeds, searching for any sign of movement. Nothing on the ground floor, nothing in the stairwells. But then, as I switched to the view of the executive offices on the top floor, I saw it again. A figure, moving swiftly between the cubicles, clearly trying to avoid detection. My first instinct was to call the police, but something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the nagging feeling that there was more going on here than a simple break-in. Whatever it was, I found myself reaching for the keycard that would give me access to the upper floors. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like it took an eternity. With each passing second, my mind raced through possible scenarios. Was it a burglar, a disgruntled employee, or something worse? The doors slid open with a soft ding that seemed deafening in the silence of the night. I stepped out cautiously, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The executive floor was a maze of cubicles and corner offices, most of them filled with expensive-looking furniture and state-of-the-art computers. I moved slowly, my ears straining for any sound. For a moment, all I could hear was the soft hum of electronics and the pounding of my own heart. Then, from somewhere to my left, came the unmistakable sound of typing. Creeping towards the noise, I rounded a corner and froze. There, bathed in the blue glow of a computer screen, sat a woman I recognized from the company directory, Sarah Chen, one of the senior software engineers. "Miss Chen?" I called out, my voice shaky. She whirled around, her eyes wide with fear and... Was that guilt? "Who are you?" she demanded, her hand moving to close the laptop. I stepped forward, shining my flashlight badge. "Mike Thompson, Night Security. What are you doing here so late?" Sarah's shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But then she straightened, a look of determination crossing her face. "I'm uncovering the truth," she said. "And now that you're here, you need to see this too." Confused and more than a little wary, I moved closer. Sarah reopened the laptop, revealing lines of code that meant nothing to me. "Grayson Tech isn't what you think it is," she said, her voice low and urgent. "The software we're developing, it's not just for business analytics. It's a surveillance tool, more powerful than anything that's ever existed." I frowned, not quite understanding. "What do you mean?" Sarah took a deep breath. "It can track anyone, anywhere. Social media, security cameras, financial transactions. It pulls it all together in real time. And it's being sold to governments, corporations, anyone who can afford it." The implications hit me like a truck. If what she was saying was true, this was big, huge, the kind of thing that could bring down companies and topple governments. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked, my mouth dry. Sarah's eyes met mine, and I saw the fear there, but also a steely resolve. "Because I need your help. I'm gathering evidence, But I can't do this alone. If they catch me. She didn't need to finish the sentence. We both knew what happened to whistleblowers in the corporate world. I should have said no. Should have walked away and pretended I'd never seen any of this. But something in Sarah's eyes, the desperation and the determination, made me nod. What do you need me to do? For the next hour, Sarah walked me through what she'd discovered, the secret servers hidden in the building's basement, the coded messages and seemingly innocuous emails, the offshore accounts where the money from these less-than-legal sales was being funneled. As the night wore on, I found myself pulled deeper into a world of corporate espionage and government conspiracies. It was like something out of a movie, except this was real, and the danger was palpable. We were so engrossed in our work that we almost missed the sound of the elevator arriving on our floor. Sarah's head snapped up, her face pale. "They're here," she whispered. I didn't need to ask who they were. We quickly shut down the computer and ducked behind a row of cubicles. Peering over the top, I saw two men in expensive suits step out of the elevator. Even from a distance, I could see the bulge of weapons under their jackets. "We need to get out of here," I whispered to Sarah. She nodded, clutching a small flash drive that contained all the evidence we'd gathered. Slowly, carefully, we began to make our way towards the emergency stairs at the far end of the office. We could hear the men moving through the cubicles, their voices low but angry. "We know you're here, Sarah," one of them called out. "Make this easy on yourself. You know you can't win against us." Sarah's hand found mine in the darkness, squeezing it tightly. I could feel her trembling, but her voice was steady when she whispered, "We have to make it. The world needs to know the truth." We were almost to the stairs when disaster struck. In the darkness, I stumbled over a trash can, sending it clattering across the floor. The noise was deafening in the quiet office. "There!" one of the men shouted. Footsteps pounded towards us. "Run!" I yelled, pushing Sarah towards the stairs. We burst through the door and started down, taking the steps two at a time. Behind us, I could hear the men in pursuit, their shoes echoing in the stairwell. My mind raced as we descended. We couldn't go to the lobby, they'd have that covered. But maybe... "This way," I gasped, pulling Sarah through a door on the third floor. If I remembered the building layout correctly, there was a fire escape on this level that led to the alley behind the building. We sprinted through the darkened office, the shouts of our pursuers growing closer. There, the window that led to the fire escape. I fumbled with the latch, my hands slick with sweat. Just as the door to the office burst open, the window swung free. "Go," I urged Sarah, helping her through. I followed quickly, pulling the window shut behind us. The metal of the fire escape creaked ominously as we clambered down. Above us, I could hear the men cursing as they realized where we'd gone. A gunshot rang out, the bullet pinging off the railing near my head. We hit the ground running, Sarah clutching the flash drive like it was a lifeline, which, in a way, it was. Behind us, I could hear the men starting down the fire escape. "My car's this way," Sarah panted as we rounded the corner of the building. In moments, we were speeding away from Grayson Tech, the lights of the city blurring around us. As the adrenaline began to wear off, the reality of what we'd just done started to sink in. We were fugitives now, in possession of information that some very powerful people would kill to keep secret. "What do we do now?" I asked, my voice hoarse. Sarah's eyes were fixed on the road ahead, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. "We take this to someone who can help. I have a contact at a news organization. If we can get this information to them..." I nodded, understanding. It wasn't over, not by a long shot, but we had a chance now. A chance to expose the truth and maybe, just maybe, make a difference. As we drove through the night, leaving the city and its secrets behind, I couldn't help but think about how much my life had changed in just a few short hours. I'd gone from a simple night security guard to a conspirator in what could be one of the biggest whistleblowing events in history. I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if we'd succeed or if we'd end up as just another pair of unnamed casualties in the war between truth and power. But I did know one thing. I couldn't go back to my old life. Not now. Not after what I'd seen. As the first light of dawn began to break on the horizon, I made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever challenges we faced, I would see this through to the end. The truth had to come out. And if it was up to us to make that happen, then so be it. The night shift at Grayson Tech was over, but our real work, it was just beginning. The rusty gate creaked open, its protest echoing through the still night air. I hesitated, 1 foot on the overgrown path leading to the abandoned Oakwood Asylum. The dilapidated building loomed before us, its broken windows like hollow eyes staring down accusingly. This was a bad idea. I knew it, but the thrill of adventure and the goading of my friends pushed me forward. "Come on, Alex. Don't chicken out now," Mia called from ahead, her flashlight beam dancing erratically across the crumbling facade. I took a deep breath and stepped fully onto the property, the gate clanging shut behind me with a finality that sent a shiver down my spine. There were 4 of us. Mia, our self-appointed leader, Jake, her boyfriend and resident skeptic, Liv, our amateur photographer, and me, the reluctant voice of reason that no one ever listened to. We'd been planning this excursion for weeks, ever since Mia stumbled across an article about the asylum's dark history. Opened in the 1800s and shut down in the 1970s amid allegations of patient abuse and unethical experiments, Oakwood had become the stuff of local legend. Ghost hunters and thrill seekers had tried to explore it over the years, but most were scared off by the building's deteriorating state or chased away by the police. But tonight was different. The full moon provided just enough light to navigate by, and Mia's cousin on the police force had tipped her off that patrols would be light. It was now or never. As we approached the main entrance, the weight of the building's history seemed to press down on us. Graffiti covered the lower walls, a crude attempt to mask the institution's grim past with color. Liv snapped a few photos, the flash momentarily illuminating the decrepit porch. "Okay, everyone remember the plan?" Mia whispered, her excitement palpable. "We stick together, we don't touch anything we don't have to, and if anyone wants to leave, we all leave. Got it?" We nodded in agreement, though I noticed Jake rolling his eyes. He'd made it clear he thought this whole ghost hunting thing was ridiculous, but he wasn't about to let Mia go in without him. The front door was chained shut, but Jake made quick work of it with the bolt cutters he'd brought. The chain fell away with a clank that seemed to echo forever in the quiet night. Mia pushed the door open, and we were hit with a wave of stale, musty air. Stepping inside was like crossing a threshold into another world. Our flashlights revealed a reception area frozen in time. Dust-covered chairs lined the walls, and an ancient reception desk stood sentinel, its surface littered with moldering papers and long-dead plants. "This is incredible," Liv breathed, her camera clicking rapidly. "It's like they just walked out one day and never came back." We moved deeper into the building, our footsteps echoing off the peeling walls. The beam of my flashlight caught something etched into the paint, a name, "Help Me," scratched with desperate intensity. I swallowed hard, trying to ignore the chill that ran down my spine. The further we went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The air grew thicker, heavier with dust and decay. We passed by old treatment rooms, their equipment rusted and ominous in the dim light. An overturned gurney in one hallway made us all jump, its wheels squeaking slightly as our movement disturbed decades of stillness. "Hey, check this out," Jake called, his voice unnaturally loud in the quiet. He was standing in front of a heavy metal door, its surface marred by deep scratches. "Looks like someone really wanted out of here." As we gathered around, I noticed something odd. Unlike everything else we'd seen, this door seemed cleaner somehow, less dusty. Before I could point this out, Mia was already pushing it open. The room beyond was pitch black, swallowing our flashlight beams. As we stepped inside, I felt a change in the air. It was cooler here, with a faint breeze that shouldn't have been possible in a sealed building. "Guys, I don't like this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Maybe we should—" I never finished that sentence. The door slammed shut behind us with a resounding bang, plunging us into total darkness. Liv screamed, and I heard the clatter of her camera hitting the floor. "What the hell?" Jake's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Mia, where are you? Everyone okay?" I fumbled with my flashlight, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep hold of it. When I finally got it working, the beam revealed a room that hadn't been there a moment ago. Gone was the decrepit asylum interior. Instead, we found ourselves in what looked like a modern laboratory, all gleaming stainless steel and softly humming machinery. This isn't possible," Mia whispered, her earlier bravado completely gone. "Where are we?" Before anyone could answer, a door at the far end of the room hissed open. A figure stepped through, backlit so we couldn't make out any features. But its silhouette was all wrong. Too tall, limbs too long and jointed in impossible ways. "Welcome," it said, its voice a harsh, metallic rasp that set my teeth on edge. "We've been waiting for you." Panic set in. We turned to flee, only to find the door we'd entered through was gone, replaced by a smooth, featureless wall. We were trapped. What followed was a nightmare of flashing lights, screeching alarms, and the constant, terrifying presence of our inhuman hosts. They herded us through endless corridors, separated us, subjected us to tests and procedures I still can't bring myself to describe. I lost all sense of time. It could have been hours or days before I found myself back in that first room, reunited with my friends. We were different now, changed in ways both subtle and profound. Liv's eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. Jake's skin had a metallic sheen to it. Mia wasn't Mia anymore. Not really. The figure from before stood watching us, its featureless face somehow conveying amusement. "The experiment was a success," it said. "You may go." Just like that, we were outside again, standing in front of the abandoned asylum as if nothing had happened. But we knew better. The building's windows now gleamed with an otherworldly light, and we could hear the faint hum of machinery from within. We stumbled away, each lost in our own thoughts, trying to process what had happened to us. As we reached the gate, I turned back for one last look. The asylum seemed to shimmer, its form shifting subtly before my eyes. For a moment, I saw it as it truly was. Not an abandoned relic, but a facade hiding something far more advanced and alien than we could have imagined. We never spoke about that night again. Not really. How could we? Who would believe us? But sometimes, when I catch a glimpse of the strange glow in Liv's eyes or notice the way Jake's skin reflects light just a little too perfectly, I'm reminded that our adventure was all too real. And late at night, when the moon is full and the world is quiet, I swear I can hear it, that metallic voice calling me back to Oakwood Asylum, back to the place where everything changed and where I fear a part of me will always remain. I don't know if we uncovered some long-buried secret that night, or if we stumbled into something that was never meant for human eyes. All I know is that the next time someone suggests exploring an abandoned building, I'll be running in the opposite direction. Because sometimes, the unknown is better left undiscovered, and some doors are meant to stay closed forever. But even as I tell myself this, I can't shake the feeling that our experience at Oakwood was just the beginning. That somewhere out there, in other abandoned places and forgotten corners of the world, similar experiments are taking place. And I wonder, with a mixture of dread and morbid curiosity, what will happen when whatever is behind it all decides it's time to stop hiding. For now, though, I'll keep my head down and try to live a normal life. But a part of me will always be on guard, watching for signs that the world isn't what it seems. Because once you've seen behind the curtain, there's no going back. And in the end, the scariest thing isn't what we found in that asylum. It's the knowledge that it's still out there, waiting for its next unsuspecting victims. The GPS chimed cheerfully, announcing that I had arrived at my destination. I stared out the windshield, my hand still gripping the steering wheel, at a town that definitely wasn't Millbrook. The faded welcome sign read, Willow Creek, population 714. But something about those numbers seemed off, like they hadn't been updated in decades. I'd been driving for hours, heading to my cousin's wedding in Millbrook. It was supposed to be a straight shot down the highway, but somewhere along the way, my usually reliable GPS had led me astray. Now, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in ominous shades of red and purple, I found myself in a place that looked like it had been forgotten by time. Willow Creek's main street stretched before me, lined with buildings that seemed more suited to the 1950s than the present day. Neon signs flickered weakly in shop windows, and the few people visible on the sidewalks moved with an odd, shuffling gait that set my nerves on edge. I pulled over, fishing my phone out of my pocket to try and figure out where I'd gone wrong. No signal, of course. I sighed, resigning myself to the fact that I'd have to ask for directions the old-fashioned way. The diner across the street seemed as good a place as any to start. Its chrome exterior gleamed dully in the fading light, and a buzzing sign proclaimed it, Dot's Diner, best pie in the county. I stepped out of my car, the humid air immediately clinging to my skin. As I approached the diner, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The few people on the street had stopped to stare at me, their eyes unnaturally wide and unblinking. I quickened my pace, pushing open the diner door with more force than necessary. The bell above the door jangled discordantly, drawing the attention of everyone inside. And I do mean everyone. Every head turned in perfect unison to look at me, expressions blank and eyes glazed. For a moment, the only sound was the soft crackle of a radio playing what sounded like a big band tune from the 1940s. I cleared my throat. Hi, I'm a bit lost. Could someone point me in the direction of Millbrook? Silence. Then, slowly, conversation resumed as if I hadn't spoken. The patrons turned back to their meals, forks moving mechanically from plate to mouth. A waitress appeared at my elbow, making me jump. Her name tag read Dot, and her smile was just a little too wide to be natural. Well, honey, you're a long way from Millbrook, she said, her voice syrupy sweet. Why don't you sit down and have a slice of pie while we figure out how to get you back on track? Every instinct I had was screaming at me to leave, to get back in my car and drive as fast and as far as I could. But something in Dot's eyes held me in place. It wasn't kindness, exactly. More like hunger. Before I knew it, I was seated in a booth, a slice of cherry pie in front of me that I definitely hadn't ordered. Dot hovered nearby, that too wide smile still plastered on her face. Eat up, honey, she urged. It'll help you think clearer. I picked up the fork, if only to appease her. The pie filling glistened in a way that reminded me uncomfortably of fresh blood. I took a small bite, and immediately my senses were overwhelmed. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted, sweet and tart and rich in a way that seemed impossible. I found myself taking another bite, and another, unable to stop. As I ate, the diner around me seemed to shift and blur. The patrons' movements became more fluid, more natural. The music on the radio clarified, resolving into a tune I almost recognized. Even Dot's smile seemed less forced, more genuine. There, isn't that better? She asked, sliding into the seat across from me. Now tell me, what brings you to our little town? I blinked, trying to remember. Why was I here? Something about a wedding. But that seemed so unimportant now. I'm not sure, I admitted. Dot patted my hand, her touch sending an electric jolt up my arm. That's all right, honey. Lots of folks find their way here when they're a bit lost. Willow Creek has a way of calling to those who need it. I nodded, finding comfort in her words. The pie was gone, but I didn't remember finishing it. Outside, night had fallen completely, the street now illuminated by the warm glow of old-fashioned street lamps. Why don't I show you to the hotel? Dot suggested. You look like you could use some rest. I followed her out of the diner, my legs moving of their own accord. The street was busier now, filled with people strolling and chatting. They all smiled and nodded at me as if I was an old friend they'd been expecting. The hotel was a grand old building, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the more modest structures surrounding it. As we climbed the steps, I felt a wave of dizziness wash over me. Dot steadied me with a hand on my elbow, her touch both comforting and unsettling. "Don't worry," she said, her voice sounding distant and echoing. "Everyone feels a bit off at first. You'll adjust soon enough." The lobby was a blur of dark wood and red velvet. I have a vague memory of signing something, of being handed a heavy brass key. Then I was in a room, ornate wallpaper swirling in patterns that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. I collapsed onto the bed, my head spinning. As consciousness slipped away, I heard Dot's voice one last time, though I couldn't see her in the room. "Welcome to Willow Creek, honey. You're home now." I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through lace curtains I didn't remember. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The wrong turn, the strange town, Dot's diner, the pie. I sat up, my head pounding. The room around me was like something out of a period drama, all antique furniture and faded elegance. But there was something off about it, like a movie set that wasn't quite convincing up close. I stumbled to the window, pulling back the curtains. The street below was bustling with activity, but it was all wrong. Cars from the 1950s cruised by, fins gleaming in the morning sun. Women in poodle skirts and men in fedoras strolled down the sidewalk. It was like the whole town was stuck in a time warp. My phone. I needed to call for help. But when I reached for it, my pockets were empty. In fact, I realized with growing horror, I was wearing entirely different clothes. A button-up shirt and high-waisted trousers that looked like they came straight out of a vintage store. There was a knock at the door. "Room service," Dot's cheery voice called out. I opened the door cautiously. Dot stood there, balancing a tray with a steaming cup of coffee and another slice of that damn pie. "Good morning, sunshine," she chirped. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up after your long journey." "What's going on here?" I demanded, my voice hoarse. "What is this place? What did you do to me?" Dot's smile never wavered. Now, there's no need for all that. Willow Creek is just a special place for special people, people who need a fresh start, who want to forget their troubles. And you, my dear, looked like you needed that more than most. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog that still clung to my thoughts. But I didn't want this. I was just passing through. I need to get back. I have a wedding to... "A wedding?" Dot interrupted, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, honey, is that what's got you so worked up? Well, why didn't you say so? We love weddings here in Willow Creek. In fact, I think old Mr. Johnson's daughter is getting married this weekend. I'm sure they'd be happy to have you join the celebration." The way she said it made it clear this wasn't a suggestion. I felt a chill run down my spine as I realized the true nature of my situation. This wasn't just a strange town. It was a trap, and I had walked right into it. I think I'd like to leave now," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Dot's smile turned sad. "Oh, honey, don't you know? Nobody ever really leaves Willow Creek. But don't worry, you'll come to love it here. We all do, in the end." As if on cue, a group of townspeople appeared in the hallway behind her. Their smiles were identical to Dot's, their eyes holding the same hungry look I'd noticed the night before. "Why don't you come downstairs and meet everyone properly?" Dot suggested, reaching out to take my hand. "After all, we're your family now." I wanted to resist, to run, to scream. But as Dot's fingers closed around mine, I felt that same electric jolt from the night before. And suddenly, the idea didn't seem so bad. After all, wasn't this what I'd always wanted? A place to belong, a simpler life, free from the stresses of the modern world. As Dot led me down the stairs, the other townspeople falling in behind us like a macabre parade, I felt the last of my resistance fading away. Willow Creek may not have been my intended destination, but maybe, just maybe, it was where I was meant to be all along. The sun shone brightly outside, the street alive with the bustle of a perfect 1950s day, and as I stepped out into it, hand in hand with my new family, I couldn't quite remember why I had ever wanted to leave. The first gunshot shattered the stillness of the forest, sending birds scattering into the sky. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. This was supposed to be a peaceful hike, a chance to clear my head and enjoy nature. But in an instant, it had turned into something far more dangerous. I'd set out early that morning, driving to a remote trailhead I discovered online. It promised stunning views and challenging terrain, perfect for a day-long solo hike. The first few hours had been everything I'd hoped for. Crisp autumn air, the crunch of leaves underfoot, and a sense of solitude that was hard to find in the city. But now, as I stood rooted to the spot, straining my ears for any further sounds, I realized how isolated I truly was. Miles from civilization, no cell phone signal, and apparently sharing the woods with someone armed and potentially dangerous. For a moment, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was just a hunter, I thought. But it wasn't hunting season, and something in my gut told me this was different. The shot had sounded too close, too deliberate. Another crack echoed through the trees, closer this time. It was followed by shouting, the words indistinct but the tone unmistakably angry. My instincts kicked in, and I dove behind a large oak tree, trying to make myself as small as possible. From my hiding spot, I peered around the forest. The dense undergrowth that had seemed so beautiful earlier now felt oppressive, potentially hiding threats from every angle. I tried to control my breathing, knowing that any sound could give away my position. That's when I saw them. Two men, dressed in camouflage, crashed through the brush about 50 yards away. They were carrying rifles and moving with purpose, their eyes scanning the forest floor. Poachers, I realized with a jolt. And from their agitated movements, it was clear they were pursuing something, or someone. I pressed myself harder against the tree, willing myself to become invisible. The men were getting closer, their voices now clear enough for me to make out words. He couldn't have gotten far, one of them growled. Not with that wound. We can't let him get away, the other replied, his voice tight with tension. If he talks, we're done for. My mind raced. They weren't hunting animals, they were hunting a person. Someone who had seen something they shouldn't have. Someone who was now injured and running for their life. And I was caught in the middle of it. I knew I should stay hidden, wait for them to pass, and then make my way back to my car as quickly and quietly as possible. But a nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't let me. Someone out there needed help, and I might be their only chance. Taking a deep breath, I made a decision that would change everything. As soon as the poachers passed my hiding spot, I began to move in the opposite direction, searching for any sign of their wounded quarry. The forest was eerily quiet now, as if holding its breath. I moved as silently as I could, my eyes darting from tree to tree, looking for anything out of place. A broken branch, a scuff mark in the dirt, anything that might indicate someone had passed through in a hurry. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I spotted it. A smear of red on a tree trunk, about chest height. Blood. My stomach churned, but I pressed on, following the sporadic trail deeper into the woods. The sound of running water grew louder, and I soon found myself at the edge of a small stream. That's where I saw him. A man, probably in his 40s, slumped against a boulder. His shirt was soaked with blood, his face pale and drawn with pain. His eyes widened in fear as he saw me approach, his hand reaching for something at his side. I raised my hands, showing I was unarmed. "I'm here to help," I whispered urgently. "Those men, they're after you, right?" He nodded weakly, his hand relaxing. Game warden, he managed to say between labored breaths. Caught them. Illegal hunting operation. Big operation. Dangerous people. I knelt beside him, assessing his wound. The bullet had caught him in the shoulder, and while it was bleeding heavily, it didn't look immediately life-threatening, but he'd lost a lot of blood, and in this wilderness, even a minor injury could be fatal. We need to move, I said, already shrugging off my backpack. Can you walk? He nodded again, gritting his teeth as I helped him to his feet. I quickly wrapped his wound as best I could with supplies from my first aid kit, then let him lean on me as we started to move. Our progress was agonizingly slow. Every snapping twig, every rustle of leaves sounded like a gunshot in the quiet forest. I had no real plan beyond putting distance between us and the poachers, hoping to find higher ground where we might get a cell signal. We had been moving for maybe 20 minutes when we heard it. Voices, carried on the wind. The poachers had picked up our trail. There, the warden whispered, pointing to a steep hill. Cave system. We can lose them in there. It was risky. If we got lost in the caves, we'd be in even more trouble. But with the poachers closing in, we didn't have much choice. We started the climb, each step a struggle for the injured man. Just as we reached the cave entrance, a shout rang out behind us. They had spotted us. Without hesitation, we plunged into the darkness of the cave. The next few hours were a blur of dark passages, stumbling steps, and heart-stopping moments of silence as we listened for our pursuers. The warden, whose name I learned was Mike, guided us as best he could, but it was clear he was weakening. Finally, we emerged from a narrow tunnel into a larger cavern. Faint light filtered in from somewhere above, revealing a space about the size of a small room. Mike collapsed against the wall, his breathing ragged. "We can't go any further," I said, knowing it was true even as I hated to admit it. "We'll have to make a stand here." Mike nodded grimly. "There's a backup gun in my boot," he said. "You know how to shoot?" I shook my head. The only shooting I'd ever done was at a carnival booth once. Mike sighed, then walked me through the basics. The weight of the pistol felt strange and terrifying in my hand. We didn't have to wait long. The sound of footsteps echoed through the tunnel, growing louder. I positioned myself behind a large rock, my heart pounding so hard I was sure it would give away our location. The first poacher entered the cavern cautiously, his rifle sweeping the space. I held my breath, finger on the trigger, praying I wouldn't have to use it. Suddenly, a shower of loose rocks clattered down from above, startling the man. In that moment of distraction, Mike lunged from his hiding spot, tackling the poacher to the ground. The gun went off, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. For a terrifying moment, I didn't know who had been hit. Then the second poacher burst into the cavern, his rifle aimed at Mike. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the poacher's finger tightening on the trigger. Without thinking, I stepped out from behind the rock and fired. The gun kicked in my hand, the shot going wide, but it was enough. The poacher turned towards me, giving Mike the opening he needed to knock him down. In the chaos that followed, I somehow managed to find some rope in my backpack. We tied up the poachers, who had both been subdued more by surprise than by our fighting skills. As the adrenaline wore off, the reality of what had just happened hit me. I sank to the ground, my whole body shaking. Mike sat heavily beside me, his face pale but his eyes clear. "You did good, kid," he said softly. Not many people would have stopped to help a stranger in the woods. I managed a weak smile. "Guess I watched too many superhero movies as a kid." A faint sound caught our attention, the whir of helicopter blades. Mike's face broke into a relieved grin. "Backup," he said. "I missed my check-in. They must have come looking." As the sound grew louder, sunlight suddenly flooded the cavern. A hole in the ceiling, previously unnoticed, was large enough for us to be spotted from the air. Within minutes, rescue crews were rappelling down, and our ordeal was finally over. In the days that followed, As I gave statements to police and park rangers, the full scope of what we had stumbled into became clear. The poachers were part of a large, illegal hunting operation that had been targeting endangered species in the area for years. Our actions had led to the bust of a major wildlife crime ring. Mike recovered from his injuries and made sure I was recognized for my role in the incident. But the greatest reward was the knowledge that I had made a difference, that when faced with a critical moment, I had chosen to help rather than turn away. Now, whenever I go hiking, I carry a more comprehensive first aid kit, a satellite phone, and a newfound appreciation for the unexpected turns life can take. The forest is still my sanctuary, but I move through it with opened eyes, always aware that adventure, and the opportunity to make a difference, might be waiting just around the next bend in the trail. The last call for drinks echoed through the empty bar, my voice sounding hollow in the cavernous space. I'd been working at the Rusty Nail for 3 years, but I'd never seen it this dead on a Friday night. As I wiped down the counter for the 100th time, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Maybe it was the storm brewing outside, or maybe it was just my imagination working overtime in the eerie quiet. Either way, I was counting the minutes until I could lock up and head home. I'm Sarah, by the way, bartender extraordinaire tonight, apparently the only soul brave enough to face the howling wind and sheeting rain. Even my boss had called it quits early, leaving me with strict instructions to close up shop at midnight sharp. No exceptions. The ancient clock above the bar ticked closer to the hour, each movement of its hands feeling like an eternity. I'd already cleaned every glass, restocked every bottle, and swept the floor twice. There was nothing left to do but wait. A flash of lightning illuminated the world outside, followed almost immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the windows. I jumped, nearly dropping the glass I was polishing. "Get a grip, Sarah," I chided myself. "It's just a storm." That's when I heard it. A soft scraping sound, barely audible over the rain pounding against the roof. I froze, straining my ears. There it was again, coming from the back of the bar, near the storage room. "Hello?" I called out, hating how my voice quavered. "We're closed." Silence. Then, unmistakably, the sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving towards me. My heart raced as I scanned the bar for anything I could use as a weapon. I settled on a heavy bottle of bourbon, gripping it tightly as I edged towards the end of the bar. "I'm armed," I lied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "And I've already called the police." The footsteps stopped. For a moment, all I could hear was the storm and the pounding of my own heart. Then, a voice, low and raspy. "No, you haven't." A figure emerged from the shadows at the far end of the bar. A man, tall and broad-shouldered, his face hidden beneath the hood of a dark jacket. He moved with an unsettling grace, each step precise and measured. "We're closed," I repeated, my knuckles white around the neck of the bourbon bottle. "You need to leave." He chuckled, the sound sending a chill down my spine. "Oh, I don't think so. In fact, I think you're going to pour me a drink." As he stepped into the dim light cast by the bar's old neon signs, I caught a glimpse of his face. His eyes were dark, intense, fixed on me with an unsettling focus. But it was his smile that really got to me. Too wide, too many teeth like a predator eyeing its prey. "Listen," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I don't want any trouble. Take whatever's in the till and go. I won't call the cops, I swear." He laughed again, sliding onto a bar stool with fluid ease. "I'm not here for money, Sarah. I'm here for something far more valuable." The fact that he knew my name sent a fresh wave of fear through me. I glanced at the door, gauging my chances of making a run for it. As if reading my thoughts, the man's smile widened. "I wouldn't if I were you," he said softly. "Now, how about that drink?" My bartender instincts kicked in, overriding my fear for a moment. What's your poison? Surprise me, he replied, his eyes never leaving my face. With shaking hands, I set down the bourbon and reached for a glass. My mind raced, trying to figure a way out of this situation. The phone was in my pocket, but there was no way I could call for help without him noticing. Maybe if I could distract him somehow. I settled on a classic old-fashioned, my hands moving almost on autopilot as I mixed the drink. The familiar routine helped calm my nerves, if only slightly. As I worked, I tried to engage him in conversation, hoping to learn something, anything that might help me. So, I said, keeping my tone as casual as possible, come here often. He smirked, clearly amused by my attempt at small talk. First time, actually. But I've been watching this place for a while. Watching you. A chill ran down my spine. Me? Why? You're special, Sarah, he said, leaning forward. You have something I need. I slid the finished drink across the bar, careful to keep my distance. Look, I'm just a bartender. I don't have anything valuable. Oh, but you do, he insisted. You just don't know it yet. As he reached for the glass, his sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a strange symbol tattooed on his wrist. It looked like a series of interconnected circles, with what appeared to be an eye in the center. Something about it felt wrong, unnatural. He caught me staring and smiled that too-wide smile again. Curious, aren't you? Good. Curiosity is the first step. First step to what? I asked, unable to stop myself. He took a sip of his drink, nodding appreciatively. To awakening, to seeing the world as it truly is. Great, I thought. Not just a creepy stalker, but a creepy stalker with delusions of grandeur. I needed to end this. Fast. Listen, I said, trying to sound firm. I don't know what you think I have, but you're mistaken. Now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. We closed 10 minutes ago. His expression darkened, all pretense of friendliness vanishing. I'm not going anywhere, Sarah, and neither are you. Not until you give me what I came for. And what exactly is that? I demanded, fear giving way to anger. In response, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, ornate box. It was made of some dark wood I didn't recognize, carved with symbols similar to the one on his wrist. As he set it on the bar, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper coming from inside. In this box, he said, his voice low and intense, is a key. A key that can only be used by someone with a very special gift. A gift that you possess, whether you know it or not. I stared at the box, a sense of dread washing over me. Part of me wanted to grab it and run, while another part wanted to smash it to pieces. Instead, I forced myself to meet his gaze. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. I don't have any gift. I'm just a normal person trying to do my job. He shook his head, a look of pity crossing his face. Oh, Sarah, there's nothing normal about you. Why do you think you've always felt different? Why do you think you can sometimes sense things before they happen? Why do you think the spirits in this old bar whisper to you when no one else is around? I took a step back, my mind reeling. How could he know about the whispers? I'd never told anyone about those, convinced I was just imagining things. But here was this stranger, laying bare secrets I'd kept hidden even from myself. What are you? I whispered. His smile returned, but this time it held a hint of sadness. I am a keeper, one of those charged with maintaining the balance between this world and the ones beyond. And you, Sarah, are a gatekeeper, one with the power to open doors that should remain closed, or to seal them shut forever. As he spoke, the air in the bar seemed to thicken. The shadows in the corners grew deeper, more menacing, and the whispers I'd always dismissed as my imagination grew louder, more insistent. This isn't real, I said, but even as the words left my mouth, I knew they were a lie. Deep down, in a part of myself I'd always tried to ignore, I knew he was telling the truth. It's very real, he said softly, and it's time for you to accept your role. Open the box, Sarah. Claim the key. Embrace your destiny. I looked at the box, then back at him. In that moment, I realized I was standing on a precipice. One choice would lead me back to my normal life, tending bar and pretending I didn't hear whispers in the night. The other would plunge me into a world I didn't understand, full of dangers I couldn't imagine. But as the whispers grew to a crescendo, as the shadows seemed to press in around us, I knew there was really only one choice. With a trembling hand, I reached for the box. As my fingers touched the carved wood, a jolt of energy shot through me. The box sprang open, revealing a key that seemed to be made of pure light. As I lifted it, the world around me shifted, reality peeling away to reveal glimpses of other places, other times. The stranger, the keeper, nodded approvingly. "And so it begins," he said, his voice seeming to come from very far away. I clutched the key to my chest, feeling its power coursing through me. Whatever came next, whatever challenges this new reality held, I knew my life would never be the same. The rusty nail faded away, and with it, my old life as just another bartender in just another small-town bar. A new journey was beginning, and somehow, I knew it was one I'd been preparing for my entire life. The crunch of twigs under heavy boots jolted us from our peaceful morning. Emma and I froze, our coffee mugs suspended midway to our lips, as we locked eyes across the cabin's small porch. We'd come here to escape the world, but it seemed the world had found us anyway, and it was armed. It was supposed to be the perfect getaway, a quaint cabin nestled in the woods, miles from the nearest town, with no cell service, and only the sounds of nature to keep us company. Emma had found it online, a last-minute booking for a long weekend. "Just what we need," she'd said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. No distractions, no interruptions, just us. I'd agreed, eager to leave behind the stress of work and the constant buzz of city life. And for the first day and a half, it had been perfect. We'd hiked, swam in the crystal-clear lake, and spent long hours simply sitting on the porch, talking and laughing like we hadn't done in years. But now, as the sound of voices drifted through the trees, that bubble of tranquility shattered. "Did you hear that?" Emma whispered, setting her mug down with a trembling hand. I nodded, my mind racing. It could be other hikers, I told myself. Or maybe the property owner coming to check on something. But the tension in the air, the way the forest had suddenly gone quiet, told me this was something else entirely. "Get inside," I said, keeping my voice low. "Lock the door. I'll see what's going on." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but another sound cut her off, the unmistakable metallic click of a gun being cocked. We moved quickly, slipping inside the cabin and shutting the door as quietly as possible. Through the window, I could see movement at the edge of the clearing. Two men, dressed in camouflage, their faces obscured by thick beards and low-brimmed hats. "What do we do?" Emma asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I shook my head, at a loss. We were trapped. The cabin had no basement, no secret passages, just four walls and a roof, suddenly feeling very flimsy against the threat outside. The men were closer now, their voices clear enough for us to make out words. "I'm telling you, I saw something," one of them said, his tone urgent. "Could have sworn it was a person." "Better not be," the other replied, his voice gruff. "We can't have any witnesses." My blood ran cold. Witnesses to what? What had we stumbled into? Emma tugged at my sleeve, pointing to the back of the cabin. There was a small window there, barely big enough for a person to squeeze through. It was our only chance. We moved silently, gathering what we could. Our phones, though useless without signal, a flashlight, a bottle of water. As Emma worked on opening the window, I scanned the cabin for anything we could use as a weapon. My eyes landed on a heavy cast iron skillet hanging by the stove. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. The window creaked as Emma pushed it open, the sound impossibly loud in the tense silence. We both froze, listening. The voices outside had stopped. "Go," I whispered, giving Emma a boost. She slithered through the opening, landing with a soft thud on the other side. I passed her our makeshift supplies, then began to squeeze through myself. I was halfway out when I heard the cabin door slam open. "Hey!" a voice shouted. "We've got runners!" Adrenaline surged through me. I tumbled out of the window, scraping my back on the rough wood. Emma was there, pulling me to my feet, and then we were running. We plunged into the forest, branches whipping at our faces, roots threatening to trip us with every step. Behind us, I could hear the men crashing through the underbrush, their shouts growing fainter as we put distance between us. We ran until our lungs burned and our legs felt like lead. Finally, gasping for breath, we ducked behind a large fallen tree. I think we lost them," Emma panted, her face flushed and streaked with dirt. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. My mind was whirling, trying to make sense of what was happening. Who were those men? What were they doing out here? And most importantly, how were we going to get out of this alive? As our breathing slowed, the sounds of the forest began to return. Birds chirping, leaves rustling in the breeze. It was almost possible to believe that the last half hour had been some sort of surreal dream, but the ache in my muscles and the fear still churning in my gut told me it was all too real. "We need to keep moving," I said finally, my voice hoarse. "Find a road, or a town, somewhere we can get help." Emma nodded, her eyes wide and frightened. "But which way? I don't even know where we are." I pulled out my phone, more out of habit than hope. Still no signal, but the compass app was working, at least. "The road we came in on was to the east," I said. "If we head that way, we should hit it eventually." It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. We set off, moving as quickly and quietly as we could through the dense forest. Every snapping twig, every rustle in the undergrowth made us freeze, our hearts pounding. But each time it turned out to be nothing more than a squirrel or a bird. We had been walking for what felt like hours when we heard it, the distant rumble of an engine. Hope surged through me. A car meant a road, and a road meant potential rescue. But as we crept closer to the sound, that hope turned to ash in my mouth. Through the trees, I could see a clearing, and in that clearing was a sight that made my blood run cold. A group of men, at least a dozen, were gathered around several large trucks. They were unloading crates, their contents hidden but easy enough to guess given the circumstances. This was no small-time operation. This was organized, professional, and extremely dangerous. I felt Emma tense beside me. "We need to go," she whispered. "Now." But before we could move, a shout rang out. "Over there! I saw something." We ran. There was no attempt at stealth now, no careful movement through the forest. We crashed through the underbrush, branches tearing at our clothes, roots threatening to send us sprawling with every step. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of pursuit. Men shouting, branches breaking, the occasional crack of a gunshot that sent splinters of wood flying from nearby trees. My lungs were on fire, my legs screaming in protest, but terror kept me moving. The thought of what would happen if we were caught driving me forward. We burst out of the tree line onto a dirt road. To our left, it disappeared around a bend. To our right, about 100 yards away, was a bridge spanning a deep ravine. "The bridge," Emma gasped. We can hide underneath." It was risky. If they thought of looking there, we'd be trapped. But the alternative was to keep running, and I didn't know how much longer we could manage that. We sprinted for the bridge, the sound of our pursuers growing louder with each passing second. As we reached it, I helped Emma down the steep embankment, then followed, sliding and scrambling to the space beneath the bridge's deck. We pressed ourselves against the concrete support, trying to quiet our ragged breathing. Above us, we could hear the thud of boots on the bridge, voices calling out to each other. They can't have gotten far. Spread out. Check the woods on the other side. What if they went down to the river? My heart nearly stopped at that last one. But then another voice, authoritative and impatient, cut through the chatter. We don't have time for this. The buyer will be here any minute. If they ran, they ran. We'll deal with it later. Everyone back to base, now. There were grumbles of protest, but soon the voices faded, replaced by the sound of engines starting up and driving away. We stayed hidden for what felt like hours, neither of us daring to speak. Finally, when the forest had been quiet for a long time, I risked a whisper. I think they're gone. Emma nodded, her face pale and streaked with tears. I hadn't noticed her crying. What do we do now? I took a deep breath, trying to think clearly despite the fear and exhaustion clouding my mind. We follow the road, I said finally, but we stay in the woods, out of sight. Sooner or later, it has to lead to a town or a highway. It wasn't much of a plan, but it was all we had. As we climbed back up to the road, the reality of our situation hit me anew. We were lost in the wilderness, being hunted by dangerous criminals, with no way to call for help. Our survival would depend on our wits, our stamina, and no small amount of luck. But as I looked at Emma, saw the determination in her eyes despite her fear, I felt a glimmer of hope. We were in this together, and together, somehow, we would find a way out. We set off down the road, staying just inside the tree line. Every step took us further from the nightmare we'd stumbled into, and closer, I hoped, to safety. But I knew the real journey was just beginning. Even if we made it out of these woods, we'd have a story to tell. A dangerous story that some very dangerous people would want to keep quiet. Our relaxing weekend getaway had turned into a fight for survival, and it was a fight I was determined to win. The phone rang at exactly 3:17 a.m., its shrill tone cutting through the silence of my bedroom like a knife. I jolted awake, my heart racing as I fumbled for the device on my nightstand. The screen showed an unknown number, and for a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, instinct perhaps, or just morbid curiosity, made me answer. "Hello?" I mumbled, my voice thick with sleep. "I see you, Amanda," a low, gravelly voice responded. "You really should invest in better curtains." I bolted upright, fully awake now, my eyes darting to the window. The curtains were drawn, but suddenly they felt as transparent as gauze. I could almost feel unseen eyes boring into me from the darkness outside. "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. The voice chuckled, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Just a friend, Amanda. A friend who's been watching you for a very long time." I ended the call, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. It had to be a prank, right? Some sick joke played by a bored teenager or a disgruntled ex. But as I sat there in the dark, the silence now oppressive rather than peaceful, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more sinister. Sleep eluded me for the rest of the night. I tossed and turned, jumping at every creak of the house settling, every rustle of leaves outside my window. When my alarm finally went off at 7 a.m., I was exhausted but relieved to see the soft light of dawn filtering through the curtains. The events of the night felt distant in the morning light, like a half-remembered nightmare. I went through my usual routine, shower, coffee, breakfast, trying to convince myself that it was nothing to worry about. By the time I left for work, I had almost succeeded in pushing the unsettling call out of my mind. Almost. The day passed in a blur of meetings and deadlines, the mundane rhythm of office life a welcome distraction. It wasn't until I was packing up to leave that the memory of the call came rushing back. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Red is a good color on you, Amanda, but I prefer the blue blouse you wore last Tuesday." My blood ran cold. I looked down at the red sweater I was wearing. then glanced around the office wildly. Most of my co-workers had already left for the day. Those still at their desks were engrossed in their work, paying me no attention. But someone, somewhere, was watching me. I practically ran to my car, my keys clutched tightly in my hand like a weapon. The drive home was a nerve-wracking affair. Every red light an eternity where I scanned the surrounding cars, looking for anyone who might be following me. Once home, I double-checked all the locks, drew the curtains tight, and collapsed onto my couch. My mind raced, trying to piece together what was happening. Who could be doing this? An ex-boyfriend, a disgruntled co-worker, but none of the possibilities quite fit. My phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. "You should really eat something, Amanda. You barely touched your lunch today." I threw the phone across the room, where it landed with a dull thud on the carpet. How did they know? How could they possibly know what I had or hadn't eaten? The next few days passed in a haze of paranoia. The calls and texts kept coming, always from different numbers, always revealing some intimate detail of my day. They knew when I woke up, what I wore, who I talked to. They even knew about the guilty pleasure romance novel I'd been reading in private. I changed my phone number, but it didn't help. I went to the police, but without any explicit threats. They said there was little they could do. I was trapped in a waking nightmare, constantly looking over my shoulder, jumping at every unexpected sound. A week after the first call, I was a wreck. I'd barely slept, barely eaten. I'd called in sick to work, unable to face the thought of being out in public where unseen eyes might be watching. I sat in my living room, curtains drawn, lights off, staring at my silent phone and waiting for the next message. When it came, it was different from the others. "I think it's time we met face to face, Amanda. Come to Riverside Park at midnight. Come alone or there will be consequences." My first instinct was to ignore it, to call the police, to run. But a part of me, the part that was tired of being afraid, tired of not knowing, made me consider it. If I went, maybe I could finally confront my tormentor. Maybe I could end this. Against my better judgment, I found myself walking through the deserted park just before midnight. The moon was full, casting long shadows across the path. Every rustle of leaves, every snapping twig made me flinch. As I approached the center of the park, I saw a figure standing near the fountain. They were backlit by a street lamp, their features obscured. My heart pounded in my chest as I drew closer. "Hello, Amanda," the figure said, and I recognized the gravelly voice from that first phone call. "I'm so glad you decided to join me." As they stepped into the light, I gasped. It wasn't at all who I expected, not some creepy stalker or vengeful ex. It was Sarah, the quiet IT girl from my office. Sarah, who I'd barely spoken to beyond a few polite greetings. "Why?" I managed to choke out. "Why are you doing this?" Sarah's face twisted into a smile that sent chills down my spine. "Why?" Because I could. Because it was so easy. You people, you go about your lives, never realizing how exposed you are, how much of yourselves you broadcast to the world. She pulled out a tablet, tapping at the screen. Your phone, your computer, your smart home devices, they're all windows into your life, Amanda. Windows that someone with the right skills can easily look through. I felt sick. All this time, she'd been spying on me through my own devices. But why me? I asked. What did I do to you? Sarah laughed, a hollow sound devoid of humor. You didn't do anything. You were just convenient. The right combination of trusting and technologically naive. A perfect subject for my little experiment. Experiment, I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. To see how far I could go, Sarah said, her eyes gleaming with a manic light. To see how much I could learn, how deeply I could burrow into someone's life without them knowing. And oh, Amanda, you did not disappoint. The things I've seen, the secrets I've learned. She trailed off, shaking her head with a twisted sort of fondness. But all experiments must come to an end. And I'm afraid, Amanda, that it's time for you to be discontinued. As she spoke, she reached into her jacket. I saw the glint of metal and realized with horror that she was pulling out a gun. Time seemed to slow down. I saw Sarah's finger moving towards the trigger. I saw the barrel of the gun pointing at my chest. And in that moment, survival instinct took over. I lunged forward, catching Sarah off guard. We grappled for the gun, our struggle silent save for our heavy breathing. She was stronger than she looked, but desperation lent me strength. Suddenly, a deafening bang echoed through the park. For a moment, I wasn't sure who had been hit. Then, Sarah stumbled backward, a look of shock on her face. She looked down at the growing red stain on her shirt, then back at me, before collapsing to the ground. I stood there, the gun heavy in my hand, my ears ringing from the shot. I don't know how long I remained frozen like that before the sound of distant sirens snapped me back to reality. The aftermath was a blur of police statements and psychological evaluations. Sarah survived, barely, and was arrested. The full extent of her experiment came to light, not just me, but dozens of victims, their lives laid bare through the technology they trusted. In the months that followed, I changed. I got rid of my smart devices, became paranoid about my digital footprint. The carefree, trusting person I had been was gone, replaced by someone always looking over her shoulder, always wondering who might be watching. But slowly, gradually, I began to heal, to trust again, albeit cautiously, to reclaim my life. Now, as I sit here writing this, I do so as a warning. In this interconnected world we've built, privacy is an illusion. Our lives are an open book to those who know how to read it. So be careful, be vigilant, and always remember, in the digital age, you never know who might be watching. The cardboard box was heavier than it looked, its contents shifting ominously as I lifted it from the dusty shelf. Professor Blackwood's office was a cluttered maze of books, artifacts, and filing cabinets. But this box stood out. It was unmarked, sealed with thick packing tape that had yellowed with age. As I set it on the desk, a chill ran down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to uncover something I wasn't supposed to see. I'm Liv, by the way. Grad student, part-time house sitter, and now, apparently, unwitting detective in a mystery I never asked to be part of. It had started innocently enough. Professor Blackwood, my thesis advisor, had asked me to house sit while he attended a conference in Europe. Just water the plants and collect the mail, he'd said, handing me the keys with a distracted smile. Oh, and if you could organize my office a bit, that would be splendid. What he hadn't mentioned was that his office was more like a small library that had mated with an antique shop and then exploded. I'd been at it for days, sorting through papers, cataloging books, and trying to impose some semblance of order on the chaos. That's when I found the box. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the tape. This wasn't what I'd signed up for. I should just put it back, pretend I never saw it. But curiosity, that dangerous and insistent voice, urged me on. Before I could talk myself out of it, I grabbed a letter opener from the desk and sliced through the tape. The musty smell of old paper hit me as I opened the flaps. Inside, I found a collection of notebooks, their covers worn and pages yellowed. Scattered among them were photographs, news clippings, and what looked like official documents, all decades old. I picked up the topmost notebook, its leather cover soft and supple under my fingers. Opening it, I found myself looking at Professor Blackwood's familiar handwriting, but the date at the top of the page made me pause. 1987. The professor would have been in his early 20s. As I began to read, the world around me faded away. The cramped office, the ticking clock, the faint sounds of traffic outside. All of it disappeared as I was drawn into a story that seemed too fantastical to be true. The notebook detailed Professor Blackwood's first expedition as a young anthropologist. He'd traveled to a remote village in the Amazon, chasing rumors of a lost tribe with extraordinary abilities. But what he found there defied explanation. He wrote of people who could communicate without speaking, who could heal wounds with a touch, who seemed to know things they couldn't possibly know. At first, he'd been skeptical, looking for rational explanations, but as the evidence mounted, he was forced to consider the impossible. I flipped through the pages, my heart racing. Photographs showed people with strange markings on their skin, glowing in the dim jungle light. There were detailed sketches of plants I'd never seen before, with notes on their supposed mystical properties, and there were accounts of rituals that seemed to defy the laws of physics. But as I read on, the tone of the writing changed. Excitement gave way to fear. The last few entries were hurried, the handwriting almost frantic. Professor Blackwood wrote of being followed, of strange accidents that seemed too coincidental. The final page ended mid-sentence, as if he'd been interrupted suddenly. I set the notebook down, my hands shaking. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of elaborate fiction, maybe research for a novel. But as I sifted through the other contents of the box, a darker picture emerged. There were official-looking documents, heavily redacted, but I could make out phrases like subjects acquired and anomalous abilities. News clippings reported on the mysterious disappearance of an entire village in the Amazon. And there were photographs, blurry, out of focus, but unmistakably showing figures that looked more like special effects than real people. As I pieced it all together, a chill settled over me. If this was true, if even a fraction of it was real, then Professor Blackwood had stumbled onto something extraordinary and dangerous. The kind of discovery that powerful people might want to keep hidden. But why had he kept all of this? And why leave it where someone like me could find it? The answer came to me with a jolt of realization. He wanted it to be found. This wasn't carelessness. It was insurance. If anything happened to him, the truth would come out. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Put it back. Forget what you saw. For your own safety. My blood ran cold. I looked around wildly, half expecting to see someone watching me through the window. But the street outside was empty, just the usual quiet of a college town on a weekday afternoon. I should have listened. Should have put everything back in the box, sealed it up, and pretended I'd never seen it. But I couldn't. The mystery was too compelling, the implications too enormous. If what Professor Blackwood had discovered was real, it could change everything we thought we knew about human potential. With shaking hands, I began to take photos of everything in the box. The notebooks, the documents, the photographs. I captured it all, uploading the images to a secure cloud storage as fast as I could. Whatever happened next, there would be a record. As I worked, my mind raced. Who had sent that text? How did they know what I'd found? And most importantly, what had happened to Professor Blackwood? Was his conference in Europe just a cover story? I was so engrossed in my task that I almost missed the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Heavy, purposeful steps that stopped right outside the office door. My heart leapt into my throat as I heard the jingle of keys. In a panic, I shoved everything back into the box, not caring about the order. I had just managed to close the flaps when the door swung open. Two men in dark suits stood there, their expressions grim. They weren't university security, that much was clear. One of them stepped forward, his hand reaching into his jacket. "Ms. Thompson," he said, his voice cold and professional, "we need you to come with us." I backed away, my mind whirling. How did they know my name? What did they want? But even as these questions flashed through my mind, I knew the answers. They were here for the box, for the secrets it contained. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm just here to water the plants." The man's expression didn't change. "Please don't make this difficult. We have some questions about your recent, discoveries." I glanced at the window, gauging my chances. We were only on the second floor. If I could just... The man must have sensed my intention. He moved with surprising speed, blocking my path to the window. That would be unwise, Ms. Thompson. We're not here to hurt you. We just want to talk. But something in his eyes told me that talking was the last thing on their agenda. Whatever Professor Blackwood had uncovered, whatever secrets that box contained, these men were here to make sure it stayed buried. In that moment, I made a decision. I couldn't let this end here, couldn't let the truth be silenced. With a sudden burst of adrenaline, I grabbed the box and hurled it at the men. In their moment of surprise, I darted past them, out into the hallway. I ran like I'd never run before, down the stairs and out of the building. Behind me, I could hear shouts and the pounding of feet, but I didn't look back. I just ran, my feet carrying me away from the campus and into the busy streets of the town. As I ducked into an alley trying to catch my breath, I realized my life had just changed irrevocably. I was now part of something bigger than I could have imagined, caught up in a mystery that spanned decades and continents. I didn't have the box anymore, but I had the photos, I had the knowledge, and I had a choice to make. I could try to forget everything I'd seen, go back to my normal life and pretend none of this had happened. Or I could dig deeper, follow the trail that Professor Blackwood had left behind, and uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As I heard sirens in the distance and saw a black car slowly cruising down the street, I knew what my decision would be. This was just the beginning. The real adventure and the real danger was yet to come. With one last look at the university building where my ordinary life had ended, I turned and disappeared into the maze of city streets. Whatever happened next, I was determined to see this through. For Professor Blackwood, for the truth, and for the incredible secret that could change the world. The rhythmic slap of my sneakers against the pavement was the only sound breaking the eerie silence of the park. Moonlight filtered through the trees, casting long shadows across my path. It was just another late-night run, or so I thought. But as I rounded the bend near the old fountain, a chill ran down my spine. Someone was following me. I'm Jack, by the way. 32 software engineer, and until tonight, just another guy trying to stay in shape with his nightly jogs. I'd been running this same route through Oakwood Park for years, even after the city cut the budget for park maintenance and the place started to look a bit rough around the edges. The solitude and the challenge of navigating the poorly lit paths had always been part of the appeal. But tonight was different. I'd felt off from the moment I entered the park, like there were eyes on me. I'd shrugged it off at first, chalking it up to too much caffeine and not enough sleep. Now, as I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me, I realized my instincts had been right all along. I picked up my pace, heart pounding in my chest. The footsteps quickened to match. I chanced a glance over my shoulder and caught a glimpse of a dark figure about 50 yards back. Whoever it was, they were gaining on me. My mind raced, cataloging everything I knew about the park's layout. The main entrance was still a good mile away, but there was a side gate closer. If I could just make it there, I'd be out on a well-lit street with plenty of late-night businesses still open. I veered off the main path, cutting across a grassy field towards the side gate. The damp grass made for treacherous footing, and I nearly lost my balance more than once. Behind me, I could hear my pursuer crashing through the underbrush, no longer bothering with stealth. The side gate came into view, a welcome sight in the darkness, but as I drew closer, my heart sank. The gate was chained shut, a new padlock gleaming in the moonlight. When had they done that? In my moment of hesitation, the footsteps behind me grew louder. I spun around, back pressed against the gate, ready to face whoever was chasing me. The figure emerged from the shadows, and I felt a jolt of recognition. It was a man I'd seen hanging around the park entrance when I'd started my run. Average height, nondescript clothes, but with the intensity in his eyes that had made me uneasy even then. "Whoa, easy there," he said, his voice surprisingly calm. "I'm not going to hurt you, I just want to talk." "Talk?" I panted, still trying to catch my breath. "You chased me through a dark park to talk." He held up his hands in a placating gesture. "I know how this looks, but I had to make sure you were alone. It's not safe to be out here, you know? Not with what's been happening." I frowned, confusion momentarily overriding my fear. "What are you talking about? What's been happening?" The man glanced around nervously before leaning in closer. "The disappearances, 3 people in the last month, all last seen in or near this park. The police are keeping it quiet, but something's going on here. Something bad. I'd heard rumors, of course, whispers of people going missing, but nothing concrete, nothing in the news." "How do you know about this?" I asked, still wary, but curiosity getting the better of me. "Because I saw it happen," he replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. "The last one. A woman, jogging just like you. 1 minute she was there, the next, gone, like she'd been swallowed up by the shadows." A chill ran down my spine that had nothing to do with the cool night air. That's not possible," I said. But even as the words left my mouth, I wasn't so sure. The man nodded grimly. "I know how it sounds, but I've been watching this place, trying to figure out what's going on, and I think I'm close. That's why I had to warn you. You're not safe here." Part of me wanted to dismiss him as a crackpot, to push past him and run home as fast as I could. But there was an earnestness in his eyes, a desperation that gave me pause. And if I was honest with myself, hadn't I felt something off about the park lately? A heaviness in the air, a sense of being watched even when I was alone. "Okay," I said slowly. "Let's say I believe you. What do we do about it?" A look of relief washed over his face. "We need to find the source. I've narrowed it down to the old maintenance shed near the center of the park. Strange lights, weird noises. Something's happening there." I hesitated. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of the park, to go home and forget this ever happened. But the thought of more people disappearing, of families left wondering what happened to their loved ones, I couldn't just walk away. "All right," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. "Show me." We set off deeper into the park, sticking to the shadows and moving as quietly as possible. The man introduced himself as Mike, a former park ranger who'd been let go when the budget cuts hit. He'd kept an eye on the place even after losing his job, unable to shake his attachment to the park he'd cared for so long. As we neared the center of the park, I began to notice things I'd overlooked before. Strange markings on trees, unlike any graffiti I'd seen, patches of ground where nothing seemed to grow, and an odd humming sound, just at the edge of hearing, that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The maintenance shed loomed before us, a dilapidated structure that looked like it hadn't been used in years. But as we drew closer, I could see a faint light seeping out from under the door. Mike put a finger to his lips, then gestured for me to follow him. We crept up to one of the grimy windows, peering inside. What I saw made my blood run cold. The interior of the shed was transformed. Gone were the rusty tools and cobwebs I'd expected. Instead, the space was filled with strange, pulsing machinery. In the center stood a swirling vortex of light, like a tear in the very fabric of reality. And there were things moving around it. Shapes that hurt my eyes to look at directly, shifting and changing in ways that defied explanation. As I watched, one of them reached into the vortex and pulled something out. With a jolt of horror, I realized it was a person, unconscious or worse. I couldn't tell. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. This couldn't be real. It had to be some kind of hallucination, a trick of the light. But the grim look on Mike's face told me he was seeing the same thing. "We need to stop this," he whispered urgently. "Whatever's happening here, whatever they're doing with those people, we can't let it continue." I nodded, though fear threatened to overwhelm me. How? We're just two guys against whatever those things are. Mike reached into his jacket and pulled out a small device. EMP, he explained. Ought to fry whatever's powering that portal, but we'll only have one shot at this. It was insane. We were two ordinary people up against something straight out of a sci-fi horror movie. But as I thought about the missing jogger, about all the other disappearances that might be connected to this, I knew we had to try. We formulated a hasty plan. Mike would create a distraction, drawing the attention of the creatures. I'd sneak in and plant the EMP as close to the central machinery as possible. Simple in theory, terrifying in practice. Everything happened in a blur. Mike threw open the door, shouting and waving his arms. The creatures turned, their alien forms rippling with what might have been surprise. I darted in, my hand shaking as I armed the EMP. Just as I was about to place it, one of the creatures spotted me. It let out a sound that defied description, a noise that seemed to vibrate in my very bones. I saw it lunge towards me, impossibly fast. I slammed the EMP down on the nearest piece of equipment and hit the trigger. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the world exploded into chaos. The machines sparked and sputtered, the air filling with the smell of ozone. The vortex began to collapse in on itself, pulling everything nearby towards it. The creatures screeched, their forms twisting and distorting as they were sucked into the closing portal. Mike grabbed my arm, yanking me towards the door. We ran, not daring to look back as the shed was engulfed in a blinding light. The ground shook beneath our feet, and I was sure the whole park was going to be swallowed up. And then, suddenly, it was over. We found ourselves sprawled on the grass, gasping for breath. Behind us, the maintenance shed was a smoking ruin, but blessedly, terrifyingly normal. In the days that followed, we tried to make sense of what had happened. The police investigated the shed, but found nothing beyond evidence of a fire. The missing people began to reappear, confused and disoriented, but otherwise unharmed. They remembered nothing of where they'd been. Mike and I met occasionally, trying to piece together the full story. But the truth is, we may never know exactly what was happening in Oakwood Park. All I know is that my nightly runs have taken on a new significance. Each time I lace up my sneakers, I'm not just exercising, I'm patrolling, keeping an eye out for anything unusual. Because now I know the truth. The world is stranger and more dangerous than we can imagine. And sometimes, the only thing standing between our reality and chaos is a guy out for a jog and an ex-park ranger with a homemade EMP. So if you're ever out for a late-night run and you get that feeling of being watched, trust your instincts. You never know what might be lurking in the shadows. The sharp pop of the tire exploding shattered the quiet night, sending our car skidding across the empty highway. I wrestled with the steering wheel, my knuckles white with effort, as we finally came to a stop on the gravel shoulder. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by our ragged breathing and the faint tick-tick-tick of the cooling engine. "Everyone okay?" I asked, glancing at my wife, Sarah, in the passenger seat, and our daughter, Emily, in the back. They nodded, shaken but unharmed. I stepped out of the car, the cool night air a stark contrast to the stuffy interior. We were in the middle of nowhere, miles from the last town we'd passed through and who knows how far from the next. The moon hung low and heavy in the sky, casting long shadows across the deserted landscape. As I inspected the shredded remains of our tire, a sense of unease began to creep over me. It was too quiet out here. No crickets chirping, no distant sounds of traffic. Just an oppressive silence that seemed to press in from all sides. I pulled out my phone, already knowing what I'd see. No signal, of course. "Looks like we're going to be here for a while," I told Sarah as I climbed back into the car. "I'll change the tire, but we should probably wait until morning to try and find help." She nodded, her face pale in the dim light. "I don't like it out here, John. It feels wrong." I knew what she meant. There was something off about this stretch of highway, something that set my nerves on edge. But I pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the practical aspects of our situation. "It'll be fine," I assured her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We've got water, some snacks. We'll just hunker down for the night and head out at first light." I set about changing the tire, the familiar task helping to calm my nerves. The beam of my flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating the immediate area around the car. But beyond that small circle of light, the night seemed to press in, thick and impenetrable. That's when I saw it. A pair of headlights in the distance, approaching slowly. Relief washed over me. Another car meant help, or at least the possibility of it. But as the vehicle drew closer, that relief turned to unease. It was moving too slowly, almost cautiously, and there was something off about the headlights. They seemed too far apart, too high off the ground for a normal car. The vehicle came to a stop about 50 yards behind us. In the rearview mirror, I could just make out the outline of a large truck or van. The headlights stayed on, blinding in their intensity. "John." Sarah's voice was tight with fear. "What's going on?" I shook my head, trying to appear calm for her and Emily's sake. "Probably just someone stopping to help. I'll go check it out." But as I stepped out of the car, a chill ran down my spine. The truck's engine had cut off, but no one had gotten out. It just sat there, headlights blazing, like some predatory animal watching its prey. I took a few tentative steps towards it, my hand raised in a friendly wave. "Hello? We could use some help if you've got a moment." No response, no movement, just the steady glare of those headlights. I was about to turn back to our car when I heard it, the sound of a door opening and closing, followed by footsteps on gravel. But I couldn't see anyone. The space between the headlights remained empty. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice sounding thin and weak in the vast emptiness around us. The footsteps continued, slow and deliberate, moving towards me. But there was still no one visible. Panic seized me. I ran back to our car, practically diving into the driver's seat. "We need to go, now." Sarah's eyes were wide with fear. "But the tire—" "No time." I cut her off, jamming the key into the ignition. The engine sputtered once, twice, before roaring to life. I threw the car into drive, the partially attached spare tire wobbling dangerously as we pulled away. In the rearview mirror, I saw the truck's headlights swing around, following us. It started to move, picking up speed quickly. "Dad, what's happening?" Emily's small voice came from the back seat, trembling with fear. "It's okay, sweetheart," I lied, pushing our damaged car to its limits. "We're just playing a little game of chase, and that's all." The truck was gaining on us, its massive form filling my rearview mirror. The spare tire was making the car pull to one side, requiring all my concentration to keep us on the road. Suddenly, a new set of headlights appeared ahead of us. Another truck, identical to the one behind us, blocking the road. I swore under my breath, looking frantically for an escape route. There, a narrow dirt road branching off from the highway. I wrenched the steering wheel, sending us bumping and jolting down the unpaved track. The trucks followed, their powerful engines easily handling the rough terrain. We were being herded, I realized with growing horror, driven deeper into this desolate wasteland, away from any possibility of help. The dirt road ended abruptly at the edge of a cliff. I slammed on the brakes, our car skidding to a stop mere feet from the drop. The trucks pulled up behind us, boxing us in. "John!" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "What do we do?" I didn't have an answer. We were trapped, with nowhere left to run. The trucks and headlights shut off simultaneously, plunging us into darkness. In the sudden silence, I could hear doors opening, footsteps approaching our car from all sides. "Lock the doors," I instructed, knowing it was a futile gesture. Whatever was out there, I doubted locked doors would stop them. Shapes moved in the darkness, barely visible in the faint moonlight. They were human-like, but something about their movements was off. Too fluid, too precise. A tap on my window made me jump. I turned to see a face peering in at me. But it wasn't a face, not really. It was smooth, featureless, like a mannequin's head. Where the eyes should have been, there were only dark, empty sockets. I heard Sarah stifle a scream. Similar faces were pressed against every window, staring in at us with their eyeless gaze. One of the figures reached for the door handle. I tensed, prepared to fight, to do whatever it took to protect my family. But the door didn't open. Instead, a sound filled the car, a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Sarah and Emily slumped in their seats, unconscious. I fought against the encroaching darkness, struggled to stay awake, but it was a losing battle. As my eyes closed, the last thing I saw was those blank faces, watching impassively as we succumbed to whatever force they were exerting. I woke with a start, sunlight streaming through the car windows. We were parked on the side of the highway, our spare tire properly attached. Sarah and Emily were stirring beside me, looking as confused as I felt. What happened?" Sarah asked, rubbing her eyes. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog from my mind. "I'm not sure. Must have been more tired than I thought. Pulled over to rest for a bit." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't true. The events of the night came flooding back. The chase, the cliff, those faceless figures. It couldn't have been a dream. It had felt too real, too vivid. Yet here we were, safe and sound on the highway. No sign of any trucks, no mysterious dirt road, no cliff. As we pulled back onto the road, continuing our journey as if nothing had happened, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd experienced something beyond explanation. Something that had chosen, for whatever reason, to let us go. I glanced in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see a truck appearing on the horizon. But there was nothing there. Nothing but the long, empty stretch of highway behind us. We drove on in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. But I knew that none of us would ever look at a deserted highway the same way again, because now we knew what could be lurking out there in the darkness, waiting for unwary travelers. And as we passed a sign welcoming us to the next town, I made a silent vow. No more night driving. No more remote highways. From now on, we'd stick to the well-traveled roads, the busy interstates. Because sometimes, the things that go bump in the night are all too real. And not all of them are content to simply watch from the shadows.